The wind off the narrow sea carried the scent of brine and distant storms, as Daenerys Targaryen stood at the forecastle of the great cog wind-kissed, her silver-gold hair unbound and thrashing against her cheeks. Drogon's shadow tracked their progress in slow arcs above, the dragon's wings slicing clouds that drifted listlessly in late summer haze. All around her, a new armada creaked and murmured, 100 hulls seasoned in the shipyards of Driftmark, and repurposed from the shattered fleets of her enemies, re-rigged under white sails sewn with the three-headed dragon wrapped in a broken chain. It was a banner for a future no maester had yet inked, one she would name the Free World Empire, though few aboard understood the breadth of the idea or the cost that would be demanded. The bells of King's Landing were a memory now, one that clung to her like smoke in the folds of a cloak, acrid and unshakable. She had left the ashes behind, refusing the ruined throne that had drawn dragonfire from the sky and madness from the deep places of her heart. There had been pleading voices, Tyrion's measured regrets, Jon's broken whispers, but the woman once called Mother of Dragons had stood on the red parapets of the Red Keep and looked not toward the scorched domes of the city but east, across the sea that had birthed her and every longing she had ever known. Essos had been cradle and crucible both. It would be anvil anew. In the free cities and beyond, across deserts where free folk died nameless and slavers bay, where freedom had been her bright lie and broken promise, lay seeds of power unharvested. She would bend them into something better than kingdoms. She would build an empire not of crowns but of oaths, each one sworn in the tongue of the sworn and answered in hers. She would not be queen of ashes. She would be the storm that ended chains. Gulls wheeled above the prow, their cries harsh as flint. Below, sailors from Gulltown and Pentos alike coiled ropes slick with spray. Grey Worm paced the deck in silent vigilance, his unsullied and neat files by the starboard rail. Missandei's absence was a hollowness between them, but the young scribe Mazda of Meereen, small and bright-eyed, followed in Missandei's stead, ink-stained fingers already at work, copying Daenerys' dictated decrees into Valyrian and the common tongue. Beside Mazda, 2 orphans from Fleabottom, once doomed to dust and beggary, now practiced their letters with charcoal on scraps of sailcloth. Her first students in what Daenerys named the Scaled Academy, an idea for which there was neither building nor master, only promise. The horizon lay empty save a thin veil of sea mist, but Daenerys felt eyes in it, the gods old and new, the ghosts of those who had knelt to her, and those who had burned for her. Aerys whispered from his crypt of fire. Ser Jorah waited in the stinging sands of the Long Bridge. Rhaegal, whose body still rotted along the jagged ribs of Krasnus's bastion, stirred whenever the ship's timbers groaned. She felt their judgments yet refused them. She had lived in chains of prophecy long enough. That night, the fleet anchored off the shattered hull of Dragonstone's harbor, where the black castle towered like a half-remembered curse against a starless void. Their lanterns guttered in the damp air, reflecting in water black as ink. Though the island was behind them and not ahead, Daenerys insisted on a final vigil there, as if to cauterize the wound of her departure from Westeros. She climbed the winding steps carved through the neck of the mountain, and stood where she had hatched her first dream of iron chairs. Drogon settled upon the high perch of the stone drum, his furnace breath rolling from cavernous lungs. In the red pulse of the dragon's throat, Daenerys read the cadence of her own heart. It thundered without hesitation. She knelt upon basalt scoured by centuries of salt wind. The chill seeped through her leathers, yet she welcomed it. Opening her palm, she bled herself with the tip of a Valyrian steel dagger, Blackfire's sole surviving shard, reforged into something nameless and slender. The drop of blood struck the black stone and vanished. She whispered no prayer. The gods had been silent too long. She stood, wiped the blade, and sheathed it against her thigh. Jon Snow waited at the foot of the stair. He had followed her at a distance since the day the city fell, bound by guilt as much as by love, weighted by the certainty that his hand had guided her toward a brink she alone had crossed. When she met his eyes in the mist, he said nothing. He had said little in many days. The blue in those eyes was winter's memory, too cold, too hurt to heal. She rested a hand against his jaw, thumb brushing the old scar above his lip. "I will not ask you to follow," she told him. "I know," he answered. If you must remain, remain. Guard what is left. Guide them to something better than fear. Nedista. They will fear you still. Then let them. Some fires must sear before they warm. He swallowed. His arm flexed. She felt the tremor of longing or grief in his fingers before he let them fall. When do you sail? Before dawn. The tide favors us. Joan's gaze drifted upward to the looming gargoyles. Drogon's tail coiled round a parapet like a black serpent. And the dragon? Where I go, he follows. She smiled without mirth. We are entwined, fire and shadow. Perhaps we always were. Be careful, he murmured. And it sounded like a benediction too late. She left him on the stair. When she reached the boat tethered at the foot of the jetty, the moon had pierced the shroud of cloud, a pale coin flickering on ruffled water. She did not look back again. Days passed within the rhythm of waves and canvas. Storms chased them eastward, lashing masts, rattling the new bronze cannon Tyrion had insisted be installed along the decks, nautical cousins to the scorpions that had felled Rhaegal. The dwarf claimed that if dragons were to rule the skies, men would still rule horizons. Daenerys allowed the guns, yet instructed that no powder be stored beside shot. Explosions were too eager a language. Better, she thought, that her fleet grow fluent first in mercy. In her cabin, she charted a course across palimpsests, scraped clean of ancient ink. The sketched outline of Essos sprawled wider than any realm carved on Westerosi parchment. From the smoking ruin of Valyria in the south to the haunted forests of the Jogos Ni in the north, from the black dunes of Korth's red waste to the jade sea kissed by ghostgrass, she plotted a lattice of ports like heartbeat nodes. Over each, she wrote a single glyph in High Valyrian, Vias Derate, freedom. A gray worm entered at dusk, helm tucked beneath one arm. He waited until she offered acknowledgement. A gentle nod. Storm over, he reported. Fleet intact. Losses. One mast lost on the Sir Galadon. No lives. We made repair with spare spars. Descentian. She touched the braid of cords at his wrist. The ghost of Missandei lingered in that braid. You lead well. He dipped his head, eyes still as obsidian. I served your justice. I will serve your cause. Outside the cabin, sailors sang, low, rough melodies of home harbors. Many sang in tongues Daenerys did not know. Norvoshi wails, the pipe-bright chants of Loreth, even the ululating throat notes of summer islanders swept far off course. She let the voices bleed through the planking. Harmony was Empire's marrow. She wrote those words in the corner of the map and underlined them twice. The first gull of Essos arrived 2 weeks later, white wings flecked with rust, riding the updrafts along Drogon's slipstream. The dragon spiraled in leisure above the fleet, dipping into troughs, emerging with his belly glittering with brine, joyful as any living thing can be in its element. When evening settled, lights glimpsed on the eastward curve. Coastal watchfires echoed upon the water like tumbling gems. Pentos slept somewhere beyond, its pleasure palaces and perfumed baths, awaiting whichever merchant prince had outbid the last. Daenerys looked upon those lights, and felt none of the hunger that had once driven her barefoot across the free cities. She felt instead the firmness of a resolve that had no coin and no equal. That night, she summoned her commanders, Grey Worm, Tyrion Lannister, Yara Greyjoy, Davos Seaworth, and Bellerose Mohor, of the Second Sons, into the war room carved out of the Windkiss's hold. A single lantern swung from a crossbeam, painting their faces in ochre gold. We will not approach Pentos as conquerors, she began, nor as beggars banking favors. We approach as harbingers of the free world empire. You will each speak when I call on you, offering proofs of what freedom means. Proof. Yara snorted, boots propped on a crate. The sight of your dragon'll suffice to loosen their small clothes. The sight of dragonfire loosened King's Landing to ash. Daenerys countered. Fear breeds chains, not freedom. Yara accepted the rebuke with a thin grin. As you say. Tyrion drummed knuckles on the map table. The magisters of Pentos are practical. Offer them abolition of slave debt bonds, and they will weigh the loss against profit. But we may secure their harbor, without blood, if we grant them first position in trade concessions, spanning Slavers Bay, once we reopen it. Slavers Bay will be renamed the Bay of Dragons, Daenerys said. And yes, they will have first position, but only if they pledge to abolish slave debt entirely. Not gradual, not negotiated. Overnight. They will balk, Davos warned. Then their ships will founder in the harbor mouth when we close it with scuttled hulks, Grey Worm said. His voice held no threat, only statement of fact. Belaros Mouhor watched with amusement, fingers twisting the coin he always carried. A souvenir from the day Daenerys bought the second son's loyalty with promise rather than gold. The real fight lies south, he said. Astapor's Butchers' Guild has reclaimed the city. They train child soldiers in red pits. Yunai's wise masters lick their wounds, but sharpen swords. Volantis never ceased her slave traffic. The empire you dream will need 1,000 droplegs of blood before sunrise. And we will spill it, Daenerys answered. But not on Pentoshi marble. Not yet. That night, she wrote 3 letters on parchment, pressed with a seal, bearing not the dragon, but a broken chain, encircling a spreading flame. One letter was addressed to Magister Illyrio Mopatis, once benefactor, now warden of secrets. Another to the Triarchs of Volantis. A gauntlet thrown before a tiger. The last bore no name. Only a crimson handprint where the shield should be. It would find its way to the red priests of Erlor who walked in daylight preaching the Lord's coming dawn. She invited them to stand beneath her banners or stand aside. At dawn, the fleet eased into the wide mouth of Pentos's Bay. Towers crowned with copper domes glittered. Perfumed barges skated among trading cogs, their hulls lacquered turquoise and rose. On the quays, laborers in linen togas hauled barrels of figs and amphorae of sweet wine. They stopped to gawk at the approaching armada, even before Drogon circled once, blotting the sun. Silence spilled across the city like spilled silk. 1 breath, 2. Then bells rang frenzy. Alarms, not coronation. Daenerys raised a hand. Drogon roared, but she spoke a word in the sharp Valyrian he loved. And the dragon folded wings, perching on a rocky promontory above the harbor mouth, tail idly lashing surf to foam. A display of dominance tempered by restraint. Tyrion released the breath he'd held. They anchored under truce banners. A delegation approached in a gilded galley. Magister Belicho Brachis, Illyrio's distant cousin, flanked by unsullied and borrowed livery. Proof Pentos remembered her past ascents. Stepping onto the wind-kissed deck, Belico bowed low, perfume cloying on the salt air. Khaleesi Daenerys, Stormborn of the House Targaryen, breaker of chains, he intoned. Daenerys of the Free World Empire, she corrected, voice gentle yet immovable. Rise, Magister. He rose. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the mild morning. We have prepared the manse of Illyrio Mopatis for your comfort. We wish. Comfort will come later. My fleet requires water and provisions. Your council will meet with mine by midday, and your streets will open to any slave seeking refuge this hour. Belicho blanched. But, your grace, Pentoshi law. Your law ended when my hulls crossed your tide line. She tilted her head. Will you delay? A no, your grace. He bowed again. We will comply. By midday, unsullied escorted throngs of runaways through the city gates. Skull-capped scribes, silk weavers branded on the cheek, even children whose wrists bore iron rings linking them like fish on a string. Pentoshi household guards watched, knuckles white on spear hafts. No blade was drawn. The exodus streamed toward the harbor where Grey Worm oversaw ration crates and temporary tents strung between wagons. On the decks nearby, sailors paused their toil to pass waterskins to parched lips. Daenerys walked among them, anon a queen, anon merely another traveler. She carried no crown, had forgone any mask of regalia, yet wherever she went, heads bowed as if her presence itself were a scepter. Tyrion meanwhile fenced with the magisters in the vaulted atrium of the council hall, parchment and ledgers stacked like fortress walls. He battered them with arithmetic. Calculate the cost of harboring freedom against the profit of empire-wide trade conducted under her charter. He conjured images of newly dredged canals linking Pentos to the Rhône, of tariffs slashed for free banners, of markets safe from Dothraki raids, because the Quhals would be Daenerys' allies or ash. By the time shadows stretched, the magisters stepped from the hall pale and hollow-eyed as if flayed by numbers rather than knives. That evening, Daenerys dined on deck beneath lanterns fed with lemon oil. The smells of Pentos, garlic sizzling in olive, honeyed almond cakes, lamb grilled on citrus branches, carried across the bay. Yet she tasted little. Her hunger was older, deeper. Grey Worm reported the tally: 2,000 freed by dusk, another 1,000 by dawn if the city gates stayed open. She nodded. "Tonight," she said, "send ravens to every free city. Norvos, Bravos, Tyrosh, Mir, Qohor, Loreth, Lys. Invite them to Pentos. 7 days hence I will speak to their envoys from the deck of the Wind-Kissed." "And if they do not come?" Grey Worm asked. "They will come. Curiosity is a cousin to fear." She dismissed him and remained alone with the stars. Drogon patrolled the dark beyond lantern glow, a drifting constellation of red embers in his throat. Across the water, Pentos glittered like a crusted jewel. Somewhere within its manses, schemers plotted betrayal, opportunists primed wagons for flight, and children once kept in chains whispered new words of belonging. The shape of her empire traced itself in those whispers. 7 days later, envoys gathered. Some fleets arrived under truce banners, others with token escorts of sellswords. Braavos sent the Sea Lord's diplomat in a sleek purple-sailed skimmer. Tyrosh dispatched a quartet of merchants in peacock finery. Norvoshi priests came bare-chested behind ropes of bells. The Lyseni, fragrant and indolent, paraded pleasure slaves painted in swirling dyes, until Unsullied stripped the slave masters of whips and dye alike, leaving them scandalized and silent. It was a spectacle, but Daenerys was not there for spectacle. She stood upon the main deck, hair bound in 3 braids, one for each dragon, living or lost, looped with thin chains melted from the collars of freed children. Grey Worm flanked her right, Tyrion and Davos to her left. Yara and Bellerose perched on the aft rail, sharp eyes measuring every ship within bowshot. The envoys arrayed themselves below, on barges tethered side by side. Daenerys raised an open hand. The harbor hushed. Even the gulls settled. "When I was a girl," she began, "the world was a story told to me by those who caged me. They taught me kingdoms are won by birth and lost by failure, that freedom is a coin only kings may spend. I learned their lesson. Then I broke it." Her voice carried over water, unhurried. "I come to you not with crowns but with choice. The free world empire is not another yoke. It is an accord. Any city may join. To join, you abolish slavery in all forms, forever. You pledge that no child shall be born in chains. You pledge that trade be open on seas and roads alike, taxed only so far as to feed the hungry and protect the weak. You pledge your armies to defend any member city against slavers, warlords, and tyrants who would deny these truths. Then," she paused. The lanterns cast gold across her features, but her eyes were pale flame. "In return, your merchants will roam without tribute on my waters. Your grain ships will dock unharassed in my harbors. Your children will learn letters beside mine in academies where knowledge is the only coin. And my dragons will fly above you, not as terror but as guardians." "Men see." A Lyseni envoy, cheeks rouged, barked laughter. "Guardians, she says. Yet guardians burn when displeased." Daenerys held his gaze. "Guardians burn when traitors scuttle in shadows. Stand in the sun, and you will not fear the fire." Murmurs rippled. The Bravosi diplomat, face hidden by a half-mask of black lacquer, raised a hand. "We of the Titan remember the doom. Empires rise and shatter. What assurance have we that yours endures beyond one queen's life?" "Nessunt her," she answered plainly. None. Empires are fragile as glass, but oaths endure when all who swear them believe. I will forge belief with tempered trust and unwavering justice. If I fail, let the dream stand on legs of its own. Slowly, she unclasped the thin chain around her throat, a link for every freed slave of Marine who had died during the poisoned peace that followed her flight, and dropped it over the rail. It hit the water with scarcely a ripple and was gone. I give you 7 days. Return to your councils. Debate. Plot. Line. Fear. Hope. Then, send word. Those who join us will stand beneath my wings. Those who refuse may sail free, untouched, so long as they carry no slave. No. She stepped back. Grey Worm signaled. On cue, the unsullied ranks parted, revealing a long barge laden with bundles of fresh bread, casks of clean water, and crates of cured meat. Davos called it the bounty of chains, the first tithe of the empire. The barge was cut adrift, allowed to glide without escort toward the envoy fleet. Sailors aboard the barges reached eager hands. Daenerys watched them, and she did not smile. But something within her loosened, a knot pulled tight since Marine smoke. She had torn down enough. Now she had laid a single stone for something larger. That night, Tyrion found her on the upper deck staring at the city's lights. He offered a goblet of Volantine red. She sipped. It tasted of smoke and berries. 7 days, he mused. Wars have begun in less time. Peace may begin in less, she said. Or not at all. The Braavosi will weigh your words against their own tithe. Their iron bank already profits from slave debt, though they launder the coin through distant proxies. Volantis will never yield quickly. And Korth. I will go to Korth, she said. I left a promise unkept there. Tyrion's brows rose. The Spice King you threatened. He is dust. I speak of the undying ones who stole my children. Their warlocks creep again. They seek my death, or perhaps my dragon's breath. Either way, Korth must see what justice looks like in a free world. He studied her, wine sloshing as the deck swayed. And Jon? What of him? Will he remain ghosting after you like a hunted shadow? The North will call him back if winter threatens. Daenerys closed her eyes. Whatever road he walks, let him find it without me. I cannot be chain or compass. Tyrion inclined his head. As you wish, your... He stopped, swallowing the old honorific. As you wish, Daenerys. She returned the goblet. Sleep, Tyrion. The dawn brings new envoys, new lies, new truths. Left alone, she traced the seam where railing met deck. Below, freed children lay in makeshift hammocks between stacks of salted cod. They whispered of tomorrow, as if the word were a door newly discovered. Daenerys listened until their voices blurred with the hush of waves, a lullaby woven of water, hope, and the soft hiss of Drogon's distant wings. The next day, an arrow landed on the bow of the Windkist. No blood, no poison, only a scroll bound by crimson silk. Its script read, We remember the Harpy. Yunkai will not kneel. Volantis will not kneel. Meereen will fall again, and this time forever. The sigil at the foot was a golden whip, entangled by 3 heads, a grotesque parody of her own banner. Grey Worm's jaw tightened. Let me sail tonight. We will cut out their tongues. No. Daenerys' eyes narrowed. Let them bark. Dogs bark louder before the lash. But she ordered scouts dispatched. Yara's swiftest longship slipped beneath twilight, carrying ravens trained to return if the crew spotted enemy fleets. She would not be caught, as she had been at Slaver's Bay. Trusting too long, acting too late. On the 3rd morning, word arrived. A Volantine war host of 30 triremes was massing south of the Rhoyne's mouth. Rowed by collared men commanded by tiger cloaks promised gold for her head. Their rum-green sails bore the black tiger rampant. Behind them, smaller cogs of slave traders followed like remoras, hungry for wreckage. Daenerys gathered her commanders beneath Drogon's wing on the rocky spit outside Pentos. The dragon towered behind her, a shadow stitched to the earth, eyes glowing ember red. Sea spray cooled nothing. "We face 30 ships," she said. "Wind-Kissed and her sisters number 100 die. Yet we cannot simply burn them. Those oars are pulled by slaves." "Nemen." Davos stroked his beard. "We might cripple their steering without full fire. Burn the sailcloth first, leave them dead in the water. Then board and free the rowers," Yara offered, grinning. "Ironborn know a boarding song." Tyrion poured sand over the crude map scratched on slate. "Our cannons can shatter the helms. Grapple hooks, then Ironborn go in. While Drogon keeps the tiger cloaks occupied," Bellerose added. Daenerys listened, weaving each thread into cloth. At length she spoke. "At dawn, we sail south. Wind-Kissed at point, Greyjoy longships flanking. Unsullied command the boarding parties, Ironborn clear the decks. No slave is to die if it can be helped." Her gaze burned across the gathering. "If you disobey, I will see you answer for every spilled drop." They nodded. Even Yara, whose grin only widened. That night, she stood again at the prow. The sea was a black sheet, torn by moonlight. Jon Snow emerged from below where he had spoken long with Davos. Ghost padded at his heel, white fur luminous. "You ride south to war," Jon said. "I ride south to free the enslaved. A war all the same." She watched the wolf sniff wind, hackles rising at Drogon's distant shape. "Will you return north?" "Not yet." He looked away. "There is work here. Davos will sail with me to Sunspear, speak to Prince Corin Dane. Dorne might pledge ships coin, and the north will wait." She nodded. "Then ride this path beside me, but be not burdened. Fight, if fight calls. But remember mercy. I must remind myself as well." "Neorn." He met her gaze then, and in his blue-gray eyes she saw the wall's ghost, Winterfell's godswood, and a flicker of a hearth not yet built. Neither spoke the words coiled behind their lips. They stood until dawn began to bruise the east. The Battle of Greenwine Gulf unfolded beneath a rising sun that painted the sea like molten copper. Daenerys flew high astride Drogon, wind whipping hair across her face, the harness creaking as the dragon banked toward enemy sails. Arrows glittered upward like thrown pebbles of light. Drogon's fire spouted not in long torrents, but in surgical lances that snapped rigging, melted mast rings, seared through helm wheels. Flames roared, yet decks did not explode into infernos. Instead, canvas crumpled, oars faltered, and ships staggered blind. Below, the Wind-Kissed carved through waves, cannon belching iron. The concussive crack rattled Daenerys's bones even in the sky. Grapple lines soared. Ironborn clad in boiled leather swung across screaming like stormborn shades. Unsullied followed in disciplined silence, shields interlocking, short spears thrusting at tiger cloaks who broke ranks in panic. Slave rowers dropped oars and reached skyward, tears cutting clean lines through grimed cheeks. Daenerys circled, angling Drogon into a dive when she saw a Volantene captain raise a catapult loaded with pots of green wildfire, contraband stolen from King's Landing vaults. The pot arced, blazing emerald. She shouted a command. Drogon veered and exhaled a blast that vaporized the pot mid-air. The wildfire burst outward in a sizzling halo, droplets falling harmless where no deck lay. But the heat slapped her skin like an open furnace. Memories of Blackwater Bay, passed down in rumor, seared her thoughts. On the Wind-Kissed's forecastle, Tyrion watched the green glare, a grimace twisting his mouth. He remembered, too. The battle lasted the turn of a glass. When it ended, all 30 triremes drifted mastless. Not one burned fully. Salted steam rose from dragonfire quenched by sea. 9 of Daenerys' ships were damaged, 2 holed below waterline but held afloat. No slave died. 200 tiger cloaks surrendered. Another 100 lay dead or dying. There had been no quarter for the masters. On a captured deck, Daenerys stood among freed rowers as Unsullied struck their chains. Men and women lifted eyes heavy with disbelief. Some fell to knees. Some simply wept in the shadow of Drogon perched on the stern. She spoke to them, each phrase repeated by Mazda in Valyrian Giscari and Roy Nartung. You are free. You owe nothing for the lives you were forced to give. You may sail where you wish under protection of the free world empire. Or you may remain and help us build something new. Then, a man whose back was a lattice of fresh whip scars knelt. I will sail with you, Dragon Queen. A woman with shorn hair clasped Daenerys' wrist. I will fight, she said. Teach me. Daenerys bade the unsullied sea to them, and for a long breath, she closed her eyes and listened to the hush of waves over shattered planks. In that hush, she almost heard children laughing among lemon trees that had never borne fruit for her. She opened her eyes. The empire was not yet born, but it breathed here, in the salt, in the silence after chains fell. News of the battle winged across Essos, faster than her ravens. By the time the fleet anchored again at Pentos, envoys of Norvos and Mera waited, scrolls in hand, pledging conditional alliance provided their religious customs be observed, and their guild charters protected. Daenerys agreed, stipulating that no guild may own men or women within its charter. They balked until Tyrion produced ledgers, showing more profit in share wages than slave upkeep. Braavos remained silent. Volantis raged but licked wounds, its high priestess invoking the Lord of Light in screams by the temple of the Red God. The people of Pentos saw none of that rage. They saw ships disgorging freed slaves who walked unbowed down marble streets. They saw the unsullied stand guard at markets without tax collectors extorting coin. They saw children once branded now playing in sun-washed courtyards, while Grey Worm organized a league of teachers drawn from every tongue aboard the fleet. So when Magister Bellico Brachis convened a city in the Piazza of 100 Fountains to vote on joining the Free World Empire, a custom rare in Pentos but resurrected that day, the crowd roared yes before he finished the question. 3 nights later, Daenerys stood at the edge of the piazza, lanterns bobbing like 1,000 drifting stars above the fountains. Musicians played flutes carved of ivory, drums skinned with goat. Freedmen danced beside merchants, unsullied, beside artisans. She felt the weight of joy like armor, strange and glittering. Mazda approached, scroll in hand. A rider from Braavos, she said, eyes bright. The Sea Lord accepts your invitation. A Braavosi fleet will arrive in 10 days. Daenerys took the scroll. The Sea Lord's seal was a mask of iron, raised in solemn salute. She looked beyond Mazda to the celebrating multitude and whispered, Then the work begins. Because she knew. Alliances forged in plazas may shatter in deserts. Tigers lick wounds only to pounce anew. Dragons tire. Queens bleed. But tonight, in the heart of a city once fattened on bondage, freedom breathed, and its breath smelled of salt, lemon oil, and the unmeasured sky. She raised a hand. Drogon answered in the heavens, a jet ribbon of shadow scrawling across the half-moon. Below, the crowd lifted voices in ululation. No hymn she knew, but she learned the cadence in her bones. It was the song of something being born. And though the night wore on, and the flutes trilled higher, that song outlasted them all, echoing over dark water toward every shore where chains lay waiting to be broken. By 9. Dawn found the harbor of Pentos glazed in opalescent mist, the water's surface smooth as a forged mirror. Daenerys Targaryen woke before the city's first bells, driven from her narrow sleep by a dream she could not fully recall. A table of rough-hewn stone, a map etched in living fire, and a voice, neither man nor woman, whispering names she had never heard. When her eyes opened, the dream's glow clung like dew to her lashes. She dressed without aid, choosing plain riding leathers worked in black and garnet. The only adornment a twist of spun silver at her throat, that Mazda had presented the night before as a token from the freed children who now called themselves chain-breakers. On deck the air was resin-sharp, scented by tar and lemon oil. Sailors labored in quiet rhythms, repairing lines frayed in the battle of Green Wine Gulf. No laughter, no song yet. The hush felt reverent. Across the bay, Pentos slept behind its layers of marble colonnades and cypress-shadowed gardens, unaware that another hinge of history was about to turn. Daenerys paused beside the forward catapult, hand on chilled iron, and let the hush breathe around her. Drogon's outline lay draped on the promontory like a mantled mountain, wings half unfurled to drink the weak sun. Every few heartbeats a coil of smoke coiled from his nostrils and mixed with the mist in lazy spirals. Grey Worm appeared, helm tucked beneath one arm. He inclined his head. 10 Braavosi galleys sighted at first light. Purple sails, iron prows. They keep distance beyond bolt range. Wise, she said. Any banners? Silver moon and black sword, he replied. The Sea Lord's flag of parley. Daenerys nodded. Signal welcome, no escort. Let them anchor where they choose. Have Tyrion meet me in the cabin within the hour. Grey Worm turned on the instant, footsteps silent. His efficiency still astonished her. Grief had honed him, not dulled him, and she wondered whether she herself was being honed to something sharper, or stripped hollow. In the wardroom, sunlight lanced through a stern port, painting the map table in molten gold. Tyrion arrived brushing biscuit crumbs from his doublet, a ledger already tucked beneath his arm. Behind him, Davos, smelling faintly of sea and lamp oil. Behind Davos, Yara Greyjoy rolling a stiff shoulder where a tiger cloak spear haft had left a bruise the size of a plum. Sea Lord's envoy insists on seeing you privately, Tyrion announced without preamble. He brings 2 demands and an offer. Demands? Daenerys arched a brow. First, that the new Empire guarantee Braavosi ships unfettered passage through the Valerian Strait. Second, that any city you free will honor existing loans to the Iron Bank. And the offer? 10 million dragons in gold and credit, Tyrion said, tapping the ledger, to fund whatever infrastructural miracles we dream up. Harbors, roads, academies. Davos whistled low. That's near half the Iron Throne's old debt. Braavos has waited centuries for a foothold south of the Arbor, Tyrion said. They smell opportunity. Yara snorted. Or they mean to own you with paper chains. Daenerys traced a finger along the painted coastline of Slaver's Bay. Identify. Freedom cannot be mortgaged, she murmured. If we accept coin laced with bondage, we lay the first brick of our own cage. Tyrion set the ledger down. The envoy will press. If we deny outright, they may choose neutrality, neither for nor against us, until they see which way the scales tip. Worse outcomes exist. Then so. Then we let them wait, she answered. No treaty until the world sees what coin cannot buy. Silence followed, filled only by the ticking of a deck clock. Davos cleared his throat. There's another matter. Scouts from Yara's longship report a Myrish squadron slipping north around the heel, likely bound for Valentis. 10 ships, light and fast, perhaps couriering word of the Gulf defeat. Daenerys laid both palms on the map. Mir is hedging bets. They'll watch, weigh, and perhaps sell secrets to the highest bidder. We cannot chase every whisper. Let them run, but ensure they see our sails behind them, even if we never close the gap. No. Yara grinned. Anthem fleet. Ironborn can oblige. Do so, Daenerys said. But no combats. I want rumors, not corpses. Tyrion leafed through pages. And your personal voyage to Qarth, the Spice Council replied yesterday. An invitation to parley beneath the 13's vault. Likely a honeyed trap. Good, she said. Let them sweeten it more. In 3 days we sail. Davos lifted an eyebrow. Leave Pentos so soon after the accord? Some might see haste. Momentum, she corrected. An arrow flies truest while speed holds. If we linger, every city will retreat into councils of doubt. We keep moving, keep choosing, or we calcify into the very thing we mean to destroy. The words rang louder than she intended. For a breath the wardroom fell into a hush thick as wool. Tyrion closed the ledger. As you command, he said softly. Jon Snow watched preparations from the quarter-deck of the Sea Spear, a Pentushi cog freshly refitted and gifted to him by Magister Belicho Brachis in a gesture of obsequious goodwill. Ghost prowled beside him, nose twitching at tar, fish, and stranger smells carried over waves. Jon's hair whipped his face. He tucked a strand behind an ear and leaned into wind as if it might carry grievance away. Below, Dornish sailors hauled fresh casks of water on board. Davos smuggler's eye oversaw every seal. The Sea Spear would bear Jon south to Sunspear, Tyrion's letters promising trade, coin, and a stake in the Empire if Dorne aligned early. Yet Jon's mind drifted north, to snows unseen and voices remembered. Arya's laughter, Bran's quiet gaze that saw too much, Sansa's iron-laced poise upon Winterfell's battlements. Duty gnawed him like an old wound reopened. Davos joined him at the rail. "Fair wind," Jon said. "Ay," Davos answered, fidgeting with the carved bones hung at his belt. "And fair worry twisting your face." Jon did not deny it. The North will march through another winter soon. They'll need grain trade allies, and their king roves south chasing penance. "You've no crown any longer," Davos reminded gently. "Only the weight you hang on your shoulders." "I abdicated," Jon said, eyes on the horizon. "But the North remembers. They'll measure every rumor of me." Davos followed his gaze. "Then give them good rumors. A northern prince forging peace beneath southern suns might be a tale worth hearing." Jon half smiled. "I will try. And you?" "Smuggling diplomacy," Davos chuckled. "My old master would weep to see me wagging parchment instead of contraband." Jon's gaze shifted to Windkist where Daenerys' silhouette moved along the upper deck. She paused to lift a freed child onto the rail, so the boy could spy Drogon roosting over the bay. The boy's laughter drifted across water. "Do you trust her?" Jon asked quietly. Davos exhaled. "Trust is a bridge built plank by plank. She's laid down more planks than I dreamed. But men, and queens, carry shadows. You know her shadows. Keep them in sight, that's all." Jon nodded. Ghost whined softly, as if understanding. Together they watched Windkist's banners snap bright scarlet against dawn. In the marketplace of Pentos, Mazda walked among stalls arranging crates of books salvaged from burned libraries in Astapor. She was barely 16, curls tucked beneath a rough scarf, but she carried papers of imperial writ with the gravity of a scepter. Wherever she stepped, merchants bowed or stepped aside. She offered no airs, only calm smiles and lists, which children would attend lessons at the new scaled academy, which families would receive grain vouchers until guild work could be found. She paused beside a fruit cart where figs lay heaped like swollen jewels. One fig split beneath its skin, releasing a scent of honey and rot. She lifted it, brushed away a fly, and thought of Marine's markets where children once hid stones to strike at masters. Those streets were ash now, trampled by war. Yet here, beneath alien cypress trees, she had helped erect a slate board on which children, former slaves, merchant sons, beggar girls, scratched vowels beside dragon sigils. When they sounded the letters aloud, their voices trembled, half afraid the words might burn. Mazda smiled, set the fig down, and moved on. At a corner of the piazza she found two Braavosi sailors painting a borrowed wall with a crude caricature. A dragon devouring a coin pouch marked Iron Bank. The sailors laughed, debating whether to add a dwarf astride the dragon's tail. Mazda stepped forward, parchment unfurling. By accord of Pentos and the Free World Empire, defacement of public property is subject to civic labor. She recited. "You will scrub that wall clean, then wash foul ships in the harbor for 2 days." The taller sailor sneered. "Who are you, little scribe?" She met his eyes. "I'm the voice of the chainbreaker here. Obey or answer to her teeth." The sailors hesitated, glancing toward Drogon sprawled overhead like a shadow stitched to sky. They dropped brushes. She handed them a bucket, nodded once, and continued her rounds. Word of such small enforcements would spread, she knew. Justice must be petty as well as grand, else cracks widened. Mazda had no illusions. Empire handled by scholars alone would molder, but empire oiled by equal law might just endure. 3 evenings later, the Braavosi envoy, Lord Othar Plyn of the Jolly Company, stepped into Daenerys' stateroom, velvet cloak shedding the chill of sea spray. He bowed with a flourish that made bells sewn beneath his sleeves chime like distant glass. Your Grace, he purred. The Sea Lord extends respect and curiosity. Daenerys offered wine fragrant with sour black grapes. And conditions. Curiosity breeds caution, Othar allowed. He toyed with the goblet's rim. The Sea Lord must protect Braavosa's holdings. Your new empire could disrupt centuries of delicate profit. Loans, trade indemnities, salvage duties. I dismantle chains, she interrupted. I do not snip purse strings for sport. Braavos may sail free, trade free, so long as it trades in free men and women. Debts forged in exploitation are, to me, void. Othar's smile thinned. The Iron Bank will disagree. Then the Iron Bank may send clerks to renegotiate face-to-face with those who once paid debt with blood. Let them justify the interest accrued on a child sold at 7. The envoy's eyes flickered. Harsh arithmetic. Reality, she said. Othar drained his cup. I will relay your stance. In return, permit me a frank word. You tread a sword edge. Allies respect strength, but lenders respect certainty. Give them incremental reform, and coin will flow. Press too hard, and they will wage quiet war, devaluing currencies, funding your foes, bribing your generals. Ben. I have no generals who bend for bribes, she answered. My earlier point, certainty. He bowed again. I hope we converse again at Qarth. The Sea Lord wishes observers at your parley. You will be welcome, she said, voice neutral, eyes unreadable. After he left, Tyrion emerged from the back alcove where he had listened unseen. He rubbed his chin. He speaks true. Financiers favor gradual tides. You offer tidal waves. Freedom is a wave, she replied. It does not trickle. Tyrion sighed. Let us hope the shore is not brittle rock. On the morning wind kissed and her sister ships set sail for Qarth. The harbor walls crowded with Pentashe citizens chanting valedictions in a dozen tongues. Banners of broken chains snapped in salt gales, mingled with Braavosi pennants and the black wolf of House Stark that Jon had gifted the city as sign of friendship. Daenerys stood upon the forecastle, not waving but watching, imprinting the sight behind her eyelids. A city once swollen on bondage, now roaring praise for liberation. It was fragile as dawnlight, but she anchored the memory in her heart. The fleet slipped south along the coast, skirting the Valyrian Strait. Days stretched warm, nights laced with star silence broken by distant whale sighs. Daenerys spent hours in the chart room with Davos and Tyrion, drafting new edicts about harbor tolls, education grants, and a fledgling postal service of fast cogs. She insisted every decree be translated into 7 languages. Institutional freedom, she argued, must be understood by all, or it curdled into another tongue of masters. At dusk she walked decks alone, lanterns swinging at her hip. She paused often to speak with sailors. A Norvoshi woman who once plaited horsehair for Dothraki arak handles, a Taroshi cook who seasoned fish with orange blossom and vinegar, a former Astapori butcher who now sang lullabies to keep the night watch awake. She asked their stories, listened, learned their children's names. People must feel seen, she believed. That was a queen's shield against forgetting the small. Above, Drogon hunted lazy schools of fish, stooping low to let his talons rake silver from the sea before tossing the catch into his furnace jaw. Sometimes she laughed aloud, an unburdened sound that startled crew, echoing across gently pitching decks. Yet not every night passed in serenity. On the 12th sunset south of Pentos, a swift raven landed with a scrap of vellum. Volantis had executed 3 missionaries preaching her charter. Their bodies were hung from the Black Bridge, tongues swollen purple, placards reading slaves to madness. Daenerys read the words 3 times, then folded the scrap in careful quarters. She summoned Grey Worm and Yara. We go on to Qarth, she said. We do not turn for Volantis yet. But send a raven. Tell the Triarchs I will collect their debt in person soon. Do. Grey Worm's jaw flexed. We might strike now. Surprise. Not yet, she answered. When I descend on Volantis, I want every slave in that city ready to rise in one heartbeat. That takes seeds, and seeds need time. Time we may pay in blood, Yara said. Daenerys held her gaze. Let the Triarchs think cruelty buys them breathing room. The longer they whip, the sharper our sickles become. Yara's eyes gleamed approval. Ironborn respect patience that ends with floods. That night, Daenerys could not sleep. She climbed to Drogon's perch and curled beneath the dragon's folded wing, staring at darkness, broken only by red coals drifting from his nostrils. She spoke softly in Valyrian, reciting the names of the murdered missionaries, though she had never met them. Each name felt like a stone pressed into her chest. She swore, on their ashes, that the bridge of Atlantis would crumble and its black stones be turned to schoolhouses for freed children. At dawn the weather turned thick with heat. The fleet approached the shattered peninsula where Valyria once rose, its ruins still steaming with ghostly pall. No ship dared drift too near. Stories told of stone men who hailed vessels and cursed them with grayscale, of smoky fissures bubbling poison, of shadows with wings and no bodies. Even Drogon growled low and banked wider. Daenerys stood on wind-kissed prow, studying jagged silhouettes against a bruised horizon. She imagined the doom, 14 volcanoes roaring in chorus, towers melting, dragons shrieking as sky and sea became a single cauldron. Such fury, such finality. She wondered whether her own fire might one day echo that fate, self-made doom swallowing empire. On the quarterdeck, Tyrion approached with a clay bottle sealed in wax. "Sailors swear this water cures grayscale," he said, tilting it. "Collected from a spring that bubbles beneath the smoking sea." She raised one eyebrow. "Superstition? Or opportunity?" He smiled. "If we brand it Targaryen elixir, we could fund half our barricades." She almost laughed. "Find a maester to test it first." "Very well." He leaned against the rail, eyes thoughtful. "That coast is cautionary scripture. Power without restraint invites cataclysm." "I know," she said. "Yet you lean toward restraint now," he mused. "No wildfire. No indiscriminate burnings. I see your hand pull back even when rage pricks." "I learned fear," she admitted. "The day King's Landing burned, I saw the shadow of my father walk beside me." She swallowed. "I will not walk with him again." Tyrion nodded. "Then your empire may outlive you." She gazed at Valyria's smoking outline, harsher for dawn's clean light. "If not, at least it will die trying to live." Qarth revealed itself across blue haze like a mirage of color. Lacquered spires, walls inlaid with lapis and jade, harbors crowded by crane-necked junks and barges weighted with silk. The fleet anchored outside the outer breaker where statues of robed giants, dreaming dragons, Qarth called them, kept endless vigil. Unlike Pentos, Qarth sent no bells, no rush of delegation. A single slender skiff approached bearing a figure swathed head to heel in indigo, face hidden behind a porcelain mask of a weeping woman. The envoy climbed wind-kissed side ladder with impossible grace. On deck, sailors stepped back, murmuring. The masked figure inclined her head to Daenerys and spoke in a voice like wind through chimes. "Mother of dragons, the 13 bid you enter alone by the port of perfumed dreams. Your fleet may moor at the Jade reaches 3 leagues east." Tyrion stepped forward. "Her counselors may wait," the envoy cut in. "The 13 desire intimacy." Yara spat over the rail. "They desire leverage." Daenerys lifted a hand. "I accept the invitation. But Drogon flies above me. Any treachery, and Qarth will taste what King's Landing tasted." "Now sayest." The masked envoy's porcelain lips cracked into a smile painted in lapis dust. "Qarth worships no throne of ash." "We shall see," Daenerys replied. Grey Worm bristled but obeyed her nod, preparing a launch boat. She descended in silence, accompanied only by Mazda and the envoy. Drogon soared overhead, eclipsing sun. Qarth's harbor cranes froze mid-turn as dockworkers gaped skyward. The port of perfumed dreams lived up to name, air thick with jasmine, myrrh, and spiced sandalwood. Slender bridges of carved coral arched over canals, where painted barges glid silent. The masked envoy led through columned arcades, where silk banners drifted like captive ghosts. Qarthine nobles watched from shaded balconies, faces hidden behind feathered half-masks adorned with rubies. Their eyes glittered curiosity and unease. Many clutched chains of servants, so thin the links seemed ornament. Yet Daenerys saw welts beneath fine linen, saw fear stamped into every lowered gaze of those servants. Chains, however delicate, still cut. Within the vault of the 13, marble polished to mirror sheen, reflected pillars of orichalc rimmed in gold. Atop a dais sat the council, 12 men and women draped in cloth of gold, and one empty seat draped in black gauze. Zaro Rugshon Daxos' old place, title revoked when he fled after betraying Daenerys years ago. His brandy-smooth voice haunted memory. She had once thought him ally. No more. The speaker of the 13, a severe woman named Serena Quinn, rose white. Welcome, Daenerys of many titles. Quorth acknowledges your exploits story. Her voice fell lilting around the pause. Daenerys stepped into the hall's center. Exploits collide with purpose, she said. I seek alliance. The Free World Empire offers Quorth open trade with Pentos and the Northern Kingdoms, mutual defense against Valyrian raiders, and inclusion in our charter of abolition. Murmurs. A man in teal robes, Balicho Doxanar, Spice King's nephew, laughed softly. Abolition. Quorth's economy rests on indenture. Who harvests our spice fields if not those born to service? Hire them, Daenerys replied. Wages cut profit, Doxanar countered. Profit feeds walls. Walls keep Dothraki at bay. Daenerys glanced upward. High above, the hall's dome was painted with a serpentine map of trade routes. Walls kept nothing from the doom, she said. Or from my dragons. Gasps, Daenerys gate. Serena lifted a hand. Threats ill suit diplomacy. Truth suits it, Daenerys answered. I offer trade richer than spice weighed in flesh. Refuse, and remain a relic while the world turns. An elder merchant shifted, rings clinking. Relics endure because we know patience. Your empire is a flame, bright but brief. When it gutters, charred ships float south, and dragons molt on empty roosts. Mazda's eyes flashed, but Daenerys gestured calm. Perhaps, yet flame can temper steel, or cauterize rot. Consider this. If Quorth aids Volantis with coin or arms, you align with slavers. My fleet would then treat Quorth as enemy. Tolls would tighten, caravans turned back, dragons circle spice fields. Silence. Serena's jaw ticked. The council exchanged glances. Political calculus quickened behind jeweled masks. What alternative? Serena asked at last. Join us, Daenerys said simply. Affirm abolition within 1 year. Release indentured children immediately. Invest in joint harbor works across the Jade Sea. Sign the charter, and Quorth becomes jewel of the free world. The 13 withdrew to side chambers in rustling silk. Daenerys waited alone beneath the mirrored dome. She closed her eyes and breathed incense. Memories fluttered. The house of the undying, the taste of shadow, the prophecy that mother and child would meet thrice. She remembered blue-lipped warlocks hissing threats. Somewhere in corridors unseen, they still schemed. She wondered if they whispered her death to the 13 even now. Minutes stretched to an hour. Mazda paced. Finally, the council returned. Expressions masked but posture clear. A certain stiff acceptance. Serena spoke. We will deliberate longer, with full councils of spice and war. Yet the 13 agree in principle to a preliminary pact. Trade shall open, indenture laws reviewed. The year of grace you propose begins today. Daenerys inclined her head. I will dispatch scribes to assist in drafting. A ripple of relief, but Doxanar scowled behind folded hands. She marked him for later watching. As ceremony ended, twin doors at the hall's rear opened. 2 saffron-robed servants entered bearing a lacquered chest inlaid with ivory dragons. Serena gestured. A gift. 15 rubies from the mines of Ashai, uncut, weight unrecorded. Daenerys rested a hand on the lid. I accept on behalf of the chainbreakers. She nodded to Mazda, who produced a small pouch. And I return this, Seeds of the Ashford apple, cultivated in newly freed orchards near Pentos. Plant them in Carth's gardens. Let them bear witness. Manarine. The 13 masked their puzzlement with polite nods. Seeds were worth less than rubies, yet value, she knew, could not be weighed always in coin. Outside, the sun blazed. The masked envoy guided them toward the canal, but halfway across a bridge of jade latticework, the envoy paused. Softly she spoke, voice changed. Lower, harsher. They will betray you before winter wanes. Daenerys studied porcelained lips. Who are you? The envoy slipped the mask aside, revealing a face Daenerys remembered dimly. Quaithe of the Shadow, eyes rimmed black, with tears of glass candle smoke. The mask snapped back before Mazda could gasp. Beware the warlocks, Quaithe whispered. Beware the widow with pearls of poison, and beware the river that flows backward, for it will drown the unwary. Daenerys opened her mouth, but Quaithe melted into a side passage fringed by fluttering silks. Guards nearby bowed, oblivious. When Daenerys searched the corridor, only painted panels stared back. Mazda clasped her elbow. Who was? Shadow, Daenerys said. Too many shadows. They returned to the harbor, neither speaking. On the deck of Windkissed, Tyrion awaited with parchments signed by Braavosi observers. How went the silken dance? Initial victory, she said. But serpent's coil. Tyrion sighed. Story of our lives. That night, a half-moon silvered the Jade Sea. Windkissed sat at anchor. Lanterns snuffed for stealth. Only a watch of sailors remained topside. Below, in the Daenerys cabin, maps sprawled across a broad table, lighted by a single oil lamp. Tyrion studied dotted lines of proposed postal routes, while Grey Worm sharpened a dagger with precise strokes. A sudden tremor rattled the hull, distant yet heavy. Then another, closer, like a fist striking water. Grey Worm stood, eyes narrowing. Tyrion waited breathless. A third impact cascaded up the timbers, and above, sailors shouted. Daenerys burst from her cabin. The air smelled of ozone. She rushed up companion stairs to the main deck. Night sky broken by brief flashes of sapphire flame hurtling overhead. Dragonfire, but not Drogon's. His breath burned vermilion. This glowed cold blue. Across the harbor, a ship half the size of Windkissed blossomed into silent shards, mast spinning skyward before splashing incandescent. Screams rose. Another streak of blue flame arced, striking water yards short of a Braavosi galley. The splash hissed steam. Warlocks, Daenerys whispered. Paravolts. She sprinted aft to the ballista station. Drogon already wheeled high, roaring challenge. Below, slender vessels painted midnight blue slipped between anchored hulls. Priest children, assassin corsairs, fed warlock coin. Their catapults launched glass spheres brimming with shade flame that burned wood without heat, invisible until it kissed air, then bloomed blue. Raise anchors, she bellowed. Sound distress. Grey Worm relayed in Valyrian. Drums thundered. Sails unfurled frantic. Windkissed heeled as chain cables rattled up winches. Tyrion swung onto the quarterdeck, eyes sparked by terror and grim joy all at once. Daenerys seized the tiller. We move to shield the Braavosi fleet, she told the helmsman. Bring us between. Blue flame erupted off port bow. Shards peppered deck like glowing embers that fizzled on contact with salt water. Sailors stomped them blankets. Drogon dove, jaws gaping, and his red torrent met a rising column of blue. The collision birthed swirling violet that crackled across night like lightning captured in glass. Where streams mingled, both fires died. The warlocks had calculated. Shade flame countered dragonfire blow for blow. But not forever. Daenerys clutched the haft of the tiller. Tyrion. Gun crews to the 4 scorpions. Load chain shot. Aim for their catapults. No flame, iron only. Daenerys. Tyrion's voice cut through chaos, orders snapping, gunners racing. Chain shot word over water, slicing through a warlock vessel's mast. The ship jackknifed, catapult toppling, spilling glass orbs into the sea where they shattered harmless swirl. Another warlock craft altered course towards Windkist's starboard. Its prow carved moonlit waves. Daenerys released the helm to a sailor, sprinted downstairs, seized the lantern, and hurled it overboard. As glass broke, oil spread flaming. The pursuing craft veered, sails catching edge of flame slick. A moment's distraction, enough for Drogon. He dived again, but this time loosed no breath. Instead he raked talons along catapult arms, splintering them like kindling before banking away. On the quarterdeck, Tyrion loaded a crossbow with bolts tipped in iron hooks, litter intended for grappling. He fired. The bolt embedded in the enemy's figurehead. Grey Worm and two Unsullied hauled, wrenching the smaller craft sideways. Its helmsman overcompensated, and the hull clipped Windkist's armored flank. The impact crushed Strakes. Warlock sailors spilled into water screaming. Within 15 minutes the harbor calmed. Shade flame spent, catapults ruined. 3 allied ships burned hull deep, but crews fought flames while Unsullied plucked survivors from water. Drogon settled on Windkist's aft castle, breathing ragged, smoke curling black from minor wing scorches, where shade flame had kissed membranes. Daenerys stroked the great jaw. "You did it," she whispered, though heart hammered. She turned to Grey Worm. "Any captured?" "2," he said. "1 wounded. Bring them to the hold. I will question myself." "In?" The captive warlock lay bound by hemp rope thick as wrist, his robe scorched, blue lips cracked. He stared through Daenerys with pupils black as melted obsidian. Mazda stood nearby transcribing. "Who sent you?" Daenerys asked. "Those who drink shadow," he rasped. "Those who remember your promise to burn the world. I promised chains broken. You promised dragons rule. Qarth belongs to Qarth. Even Qarth will kneel." He smiled, lips bleeding. "The Undying watch. They taste your blood each night in Dreamfire." Daenerys crouched. "Tell the Undying. I lived Dreamfire and came out brighter." The warlock chuckled until cough seized him. Blue ichor splattered decking. Grey Worm loomed. The warlock's gaze slid to him. "Unsullied bear no souls. Yet your queen claims chain-breaking? Hypocrite." Daenerys' eyes hardened. "The Unsullied chose their path. You had choice, and chose slavery to shadows." "Shadows live forever," he wheezed, then convulsed. Blue flame flickered from his mouth. Self-immolation brewing. Grey Worm grabbed Daenerys, yanked her back as the warlock erupted in silent azure, body crumbling to ash within a breath. Only ropes remained, smoldering. Musta stared, stylus frozen. Daenerys rose slowly, brushing soot. "Qarth will cleanse the warlocks or drown with them." At dawn, she summoned the 13 aboard Windkist. Serena arrived pale, guarded by 8 spearmen. Daenerys displayed a blackened shard of glass orb on the gunwale. "Your city's warlocks attacked under cover of night. 3 allied ships lost, dozens wounded. This breaks parley." Serena's composure cracked. "The 13 did not sanction. Priest children work alone. Yet they sail from your harbor, store weapons in your canals." Daenerys stepped closer. "You have 1 month to root them out and abolish the Order of the Undying. Fail and Qarth forfeit charter and harbor. My dragons will close your sea lanes." Councilwoman opened her mouth, closed it, and bowed stiffly. "We will comply." After they left, Tyrion exhaled. "A month is lenient." "Mercy buys loyalty," Daenerys said. "Fear buys silence. We need both." Grey Worm eyed the horizon. "Valentis will hear of this." "Let them," she said. "They will see even shadows failed." She walked to the rail, wind-tangling hair, gaze fixed east where sunrise-painted water rose and gold. The world expanded with every mile. More cities waiting, more chains clinking in distant bazaars. She felt both dwarfed and ragingly immense. Queen of a ship, of an idea, perhaps of a dawn, not yet born. Behind her, the fleet reformed ranks. Sails filled. Drogon vaulted skyward, wings igniting first rays into mirrored fire. Daenerys lifted her chin, as wind kissed lips and whispered across her teeth like the beginning of a song. The voyage from Korth to the Isle of Cedars took a week, each day heavy with damp heat. Fisherfolk on reed boats hailed the armada, trading baskets of sea urchins for barrels of fresh water. Mazda recorded every barter, ensuring fair weight against imperial ledger. On deck, carpenters from the chainbreakers hammered planks into a floating library, a barge destined to tour coast villages, offering books and teachers. Tyrion oversaw design, insisting on collapsible awnings and compartments for traveling scribes. Yet the deeper seas bore omens. Twice they spied carrion gulls circling and discovered gutted whales drifting. Harpoons of volantine make embedded deep. The harpoon's ends bore sigils of House Fassar, one of the Triarch families. Daenerys ordered the carcasses burned at sea. Drogon obliged, yet even his flame seemed respectful in the face of such cruelty. On the sixth night, clouds massed, moonless black. Wind-kissed creaked, timbers complaining. Daenerys stood alone at the prow until rain needled skin. Lightning flashed, outlining another dragon, viscous green mouth agape, etched upon the squall itself. She blinked. The image vanished. Sleep she knew would not come. She descended to her cabin, lit a candle, and unrolled the slit-skin scroll Quaithe had once gifted her. The hidden ink revealed itself in heat, a column of glyphs no scribe could translate. Yet tonight she saw patterns, 3 circles intersecting, a 4th orbiting, tethered by a broken chain. She traced it, wondering if the 4th were herself, or the Empire, or a threat not yet named. Knock on door. Tyrion entered, drenched. Pardon. The Braavosi envoy requests audience. Rumors swirl that Volantis amasses a black fleet, 50 triremes, 2 war galleys bearing scorpions big as houses. They sail north along Summer Sea. Daenerys folded the scroll. Heading to intercept us? Likely to isolate Pentos, Tyrion said. Cut our route while dragon sails roam south. How long? 10 days at speed. We sit 6 away if we reverse course now. She considered. No. Hugh. We keep eastward to the Isle of Cedars, then north through the ruined straits. Hard route, but faster. We could reach Pentos in 5, if storms hold. 9. Tyrion grinned despite fatigue. Madness presents as genius in hindsight. I will ink new courses. Warn Pentos. Have Braavosi fleet bolster their harbor chain, but no preemptive strike. He nodded, leaving droplets across map. After he left, Daenerys opened shutter. Rain stung hard, but horizon in east glowed faint, like embers banked beneath ash clouds. She whispered a simple prayer. Valar Dohaeris. All men must serve, to whatever power listened. The Isle of Cedars loomed green and silent, its beaches littered with drift-torn tree trunks that smelled of resin. Local fisherfolk hid at first, but when Drogon roared overhead and did not burn huts, they emerged thin-armed and wary. They spoke a dialect of Rhoynar blended with summer tongue. With gestures and a translator from Tyrion's coterie, Daenerys learned their plight. Poachers from Volantis had stripped cedar groves for ship masts, leaving soil scarred, springs tainted by pitch runoff. Children coughed black resin at dawn. Daenerys sent Unsullied ashore with healers, water barrels, saplings from Pentos. She knelt beside a boy whose lips were blue, not from cold, but from cedar poison. She brewed him broth of lemongrass and honey left by Korthi's merchants. He sipped, eyes round. She stayed until color warmed his cheeks. When she reboarded Windkissed at dusk, her resolve pressed iron solid. Volantis ends, she told Tyrion. Not by sea alone, by exposure. We will broadcast their crimes to every city. Show cedar-poisoned children, bodies strung on bridges, slave warrens reeking. The world will turn from them as it would from plague. New. Tyrion nodded slowly. Propaganda. Truth, she said. Weaponized. He exhaled. We will need scribes, woodcuts, criers. I will organize. 3 days later, near midnight, Windkissed entered the ruined straits. A maze of broken stone and hidden reefs between scorched volcanic outcrops. Lanterns hooded, they crept at quarter sail. Water glowed eerily with ghostfire algae, casting green upturns on hulls. From Crow's Nest the call came. Wreckage ahead. They slowed. Dazed sailors gaped at what tide revealed. Bones of a Leviathan ship, its hull carved in tiger stripes. Scorpions toppled. Yara's longship scouted closer. She returned grim. Black Fleet met storm. 2 galleys lost. Survivors limped north, but half strength. Daenerys allowed herself a breath. Then we reach Pentos first. Storms continued, but at dawn of 5th day, Pentos's bastions rose from haze. Grey Worm's signal flags answered garrison lights. No enemy sails on horizon. The fleet docked amid cheering that rattled tiles off rooftops. Magister Brachys greeted them at the quay with Mazda's chainbreakers. Volentene envoys arrived yesterday, he said breathlessly. Demanded city withdraw from your charter or face siege. We stalled them with talks of tariffs until your return. Where are they now? Daenerys asked. In the marble house, drinking ruby wine they paid for themselves. Brachys smirked. Good. She strode toward the city with Grey Worm, Tyrion and Mazda in tow. They entered the marble house, a sprawl of colonnaded halls. Atop silk couches lounged 2 Volantene Triarch consuls, cloaks patterned like tiger pelts. When Daenerys appeared, they rose none too steadily. The elder, Triarch Yurkavos, spoke first. Dragon Queen, we come to extend courtesy. Submit Pentos to Volantene governance for mutual security. Slavery remains, regrettable but necessary. You toy with forces beyond patience. Daenerys glanced at Mazda, who stepped forward and unfurled inked linen. Sketches of cedar-poisoned children, slave markets, bridge corpses. Mazda's voice rang. These crimes carry your seal. The world will see. Then nah. Yurkavos scoffed. Propaganda. Proof. Mazda countered. Daenerys addressed them. Return to Volantis. Tell your triarchs they have 1 moon to dismantle slave markets and release all indenture contracts. Otherwise, the Free World Empire declares Volantis outlaw. No ship flies tiger banners without challenge. The younger consul's face reddened. You think you can blockade Volantis? Our harbors dwarf Pentos. Pentos, Bravos, Norvos, Mir, Karth. Allies now, Daenerys replied. Sea lanes will choke you. Dragons will scorch your mast yards. And the slaves you abuse will carve rebellion into your bones. Memorine. Yurkavos's hand strayed to dagger hilt. Grey Worm stepped between. The consul halted, sneer-twisting. You will regret, he spat. Perhaps, she said softly. But you will remember. They stormed out. Tyrion watched them go. 1 moon. Bold. Time for cedars to sprout, she said. That evening, Jon Seaspear returned from Sunspear bearing Prince Corindane himself. Dorne pledged 30 vessels, coin for harbor work, and sand fighters to garrison new academies. In return, the Empire promised abolition of border tariffs strangling Dornish wine trade. Jon delivered the treaty to Daenerys on the palace roof at dusk, wind tossing torchlight. She scanned signatures, then met his eyes. Thank you, he shrugged. Dorne wants trade more than blood. But you carried their trust, she said. Her gaze softened. You look tired. Battles of parchment can weary more than steel, he admitted. And you, dreamless, she lied. They leaned on a parapet overlooking lantern-laced streets where freedmen danced. Music drifted, drums, flutes, a wild spiral of voices. For a moment they shared quiet. Jon spoke finally. You carry weight alone. Let others shoulder pieces before you break beneath it. She looked at city lights. I cannot afford fracture. No, he said. But you can afford friends. She turned to him. Their faces inches apart. Memories of a snow-swept waterfall flickered. She reached to brush wind-blown hair from his brow. He caught her wrist, gentle hold. They stood thus, connection taut with history and futures unspoken. But duty loomed like Drogon's shadow. She lowered hand. Commentor. Tomorrow, we present charter amendments. Then we sail again. Nemitaker. Jon nodded. Where? North, she said. Norvos calls for aid. Raiders seized river coffers. And beyond, Braavos awaits decision. He smiled wryly. Road never ends. Not while chains remain, she answered. She walked away. Jon watched till her silhouette merged with dark. Ghosts padded beside him, ears pricked toward distant roar of Drogon rising on night thermals. A streak of ember against star-specked sky. The moon turned waxen and waned. Volantis answered with silence, but scouts reported feverish activity. Slave battalions drilled night and day. Tiger Cloaks summoned sellsword companies, and priests of the Red Temple preached that a dragon demon sought to extinguish the Lord of Light's chosen city. Panic bred fervor. Triarchs hired Braavosi assassins, bribed Lysini corsairs, and dispatched envoys to King's Landing seeking alliance with a realm still hobbling from war. Daenerys convened a council in Pentos's revamped amphitheater, seating delegates from 6 free cities. Braavosi observers attended, unsmiling. The stage's stone back bore a mural of broken chains, mosaic etched in garnet. She rose before them. "The moon's grace nears end," she declared. "Volantis must choose or face sanction." An argument that spanned hours erupted. Merchants feared their trade fleet seized. Priests worried holy relics lost. Braavosi bankers calculated loan risks. She listened, weighed, but did not bend. At dusk, they voted. With a majority 5-2, the council approved a blockade of Volantis. No free city ships to dock, no goods to cross. Letters drafted in every tongue warning slavers that any vessel bearing chained cargo would be confiscated. After the session, Tyrion joined her on stage, torchlight flickering. "You won," he said. "We all won," she corrected. Braavos abstained, meaning they'll profit no matter who wins. "Let them. Their neutrality buys time." "Time for what?" "Proceeds to root," she answered, smiling faint. "The blockade starves their will. Inside, rebels gather, I'm told." "No." "Who told?" She tapped temple. Whispers from chainbreakers smuggled within barrels of cod. "Every tyrant has a cook." Tyrion chuckled. "I will drink to that." Weeks slipped by in a blur of envoys, shipyards, and letters. Mazda oversaw academy construction. Grey Worm drilled a volunteer corps of freedmen to police ports. Yara sailed against pirates preying on refugee convoys, nailing black banners to their masts as warning. Davos organized a coastal relay of towers, beacon-linked by mirrors, allowing the Empire to flash messages across hundreds of miles within minutes. In the quiet hours before dawn, Daenerys often wandered the herb gardens of Pento's eastern quarter. There she met Cerelio, once a slave translator, now headmaster of the fledgling Chainbreaker University. They walked among saplings of Ashford apples, bearing first leaves. Cerelio spoke of curricula, arithmetic for merchant sons and freed girls alike, navigation science, the histories of Rhoynar migration. Daenerys listened smiling, heart swelling at visible progress. But peace wrote only half the ledger. In hidden alcoves of Volantis, the widow with pearls, Lady Malaza, richest brothel mother in the city, distributed vials of dream wine laced with demon pepper, stirring hallucinations that bent minds to the Red Temple's cause. Warlocks displaced from Korth sold illusions in alley bazaars, promising slave uprisings that never came but pocketing coin meant for rebellion. The Triarchs weaponized hunger, offering bread only to those pledging loyalty. Reports filtered across blockade lines. Executions in the Plaza of Pride, children whipped for speaking Dragon Queen stories. Daenerys' fury boiled anew. Yet Jon counseled patience, Tyrion cautioned supply lines. Grey Worm reminded discipline. She doused anger in strategy. Smuggle grain in barrels, emblazoned with tiger insignias. Drop leaflets in markets, mocking Triarch greed. Bribe jailers to free prisoners. Embrace subterfuge, so that when dragons flew, the city would already quake. In secret, she penned letters to Sorella Sand roving Old Town, to the Archmaster of History at the Citadel, to the shivering commanders of the Night's Watch. "Freedom does not end with sunshine," she wrote. "It must thaw every winter." She sealed each with wax pressed by a coin minted that year. Her profile on one side, a broken shackle on the other. And always, between tasks, she found moments for Drogon. They soared beyond headland cliffs, traced thermals above turquoise bays, dove through clouds until mist jeweled her lashes. The dragon's pulse thrummed under her thighs like a war drum, yet when they banked over villages where children waved, his growls turned purr-soft. She fed him goats from hillside flocks donated by grateful herders. He licked blood from her gauntlet and gazed golden eyes into hers, unspoken pact renewing. One twilight, she landed on a windswept ridge above Pentos. Jon waited astride a dappled gelding, Ghost lounging nearby. They walked side by side, horses trailing. Silence settled comfortable. "I may fly to Volantis alone," she confessed. "Spy strength, chart scorpion nests." Jon frowned. "You risk arrow bolts tipped with daemon glass." "I trust Drogon's speed." He halted, taking her hands. "Trust your counsel. Let others scout." She looked down at their joined fingers. "When people die for me, each death cracks armor. I would rather bleed myself." "Armor cracked lets light in," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "And wounds." He nodded. "But I have salve." He squeezed her hands. "Let me share your burdens." She pressed her brow to his. "Perhaps I fear sharing means losing. Or gaining." He kissed her gently, lingering. She kissed back, tasting salt of wind, warmth, and something like home. They parted, breaths hitching. "We'll find bridge," he murmured. "Plank by plank. Before world burns," she whispered. "Before world blooms," he corrected. "Bloom or burn, destiny balanced." The moon-marked final day of Volantene ultimatum. Daenerys stood on wind-kissed deck once more, fleet arrayed behind, dragons circling. Drogon's black, Regal's lost yet living in memory, and 2 young hatchlings she had coaxed from eggs smuggled out of Dragonstone's crypt, Phaela and Morgar, now man-sized, inexperienced but fierce. They shrieked joy at open sea. Ships bore wheat for starving rebels, healed cedar children as living banners, Bravosi scribes to document justice. Above all flew the emblem of a broken chain entwining a red-gold dragon in flight. As sails filled, she addressed the crew. "Today we sail not for conquest but reckoning. Volantis shackled minds and bodies for centuries. We carry hope, fire, and the certainty that tomorrow belongs to those who seize it with open hands, not closed fists. Freedom is a flame. May we keep it bright." Cheers thundered. Drums pounded. The armada surged. Daenerys turned toward the horizon where smoke of distant mast yards stained sky. Her heart hammered not with dread but thunderous calling. Beside her, Jon rested a hand on pommel of long claw, eyes forward. Tyrion adjusted spyglass. Grey worm stood like a spear carved of flesh. Wind rippled banners. Seas parted. And far ahead, past the line where blue met gold, a city waited, its bridges black, its hearts flickering. Daenerys Stormborn bared her teeth to wind. "Let the chains fall," she whispered. Dragons screamed. And the free world empire sailed into legend's next verse, sails bright scarlet against an uncertain dawn. Every breath of wind carrying with it the sound of links breaking, one by one, across a world, ready, finally, to be free. "Un-ta." Foam plumed from Windkist's prow as dawn bled amber across the summer sea. The fleet advanced in measured columns, hulls creaking like an army of old leviathans waking to long-remembered purpose. Far ahead, where the Rhoyne fanned into a delta of shimmering silt, the tiger towers of Volantis broke the horizon, black silhouettes in the half-light, each spire gleaming with the promise of iron discipline and the echo of ancient unbroken chains. Daenerys stood beneath the foremast stays, one palm pressed flat to varnished rail. She felt the thrum of the hull, as though it were a second heartbeat, and imagined the cadence rolling outward, linking her pulse to every vessel and every soul aboard. The air tasted of brine and distant smoke. Somewhere beyond sight, slave forges already burned hotter in anticipation of her arrival. She shut her eyes and pictured the black bridge stretching over ebony water, its pylons crowded with crucibles, its parapets with caged children. A wind stirred the braids woven tight against her scalp, braids twined not with jewels, but with slender cords braided from discarded shackles. They tapped the nape of her neck like a dozen small, demanding hands. Grey Worm's footfalls halted a respectful distance behind her. She did not need to turn to know his face was set in the same impassive readiness it had worn since Astapor. "Signal ships report clear channel," he said, voice low. "Precise. No tiger sails visible within 20 leagues. They are hiding behind their walls," she answered. "A city that tall will not stay hidden long." He hesitated. She allowed it. Unsullied favored certainty, but Volantis offered none. At last he said, "The Storm's daughter is 2 cables east. Yara Greyjoy requests permission to range ahead with her longships. She thinks to draw the Black Fleet out." Daenerys opened her eyes. Sunlight flashed where ruffled waves met the bowed horizon. "Give her leave," she decided. "Tell her to show herself like a dagger hilt, bright enough to tempt a rash hand. But she is not to close. No fighting until I give the word." Grey Worm struck fist to breast and departed. Wind-kissed groaned as sails trimmed tighter. Along the larboard line, Braavosi galleys glided with oars feathering short strokes. Silent predators escorted by the wolf Sigil-Cog sea spear. On its quarterdeck, Jon Snow conferred with Davos beside a rolled banner of pale cloth. The white wolf rampant on broken chains. The emblem had no lineage yet, but sailors already murmured of it in the same breath as myths. Jon sensed her gaze, looked up, and inclined his head. Morning gilded his hair with silver threads. Ghostly lines of fatigue ringed his eyes, but resolve kept his shoulders straight. Mid-morning heat sucked mist from the water and left the fleet exposed under a lid of cloudless blue. Mazdan made her rounds with wax tablets, recording cask counts, fresh water ration levels, and the small petitions of deckhands. A letter to a lost daughter. A request for conjugal leave after the siege. At each stop she assured them their words would find parchment and messenger. She spoke with the rising authority of one who had come to measure queens and magisters alike. Under Tyrion's watch, the floating library barge dropped anchor in the center of the armada. A small skiff ferried children across wavelets to read illustrated scrolls compiled from Ashai to Old Town. Their laughter lifted above the groan of rigging, defiant music that stitched itself into the fleet's rhythm. Come the second bell after noon. Yara's longships peeled south, their black sails unfurled wide as murder wings, yet they flew a bright white pennon signifying truce. Daenerys counted 8 hulls, enough to sting but not to conquer. Shadows swallowed them against the darker line of shore. She turned to her officers gathered by the mainmast. Tyrion unrolled a sheaf of charcoal sketches. "Scorpion emplacements cluster along the river's northern levee," he said, tapping one blurred smudge after another. 3 dozen at least, each boasting winches refitted for iron-barbed bolts thicker than a man's arm, and long as a Dornish lance. "These 2 here," he pointed, "control the delta mouth. Disable them, and we shear half the city's sting." Grey Worm leaned over the sketches, brow furrowed. Unsullied storm the levee in skiffs. Night approach best. Silence, then swift ladder push. "Now what?" "Night might help your blades," Tyrion agreed. "But we've little moon for navigation, and shifting sandbars aplenty. You'd lose skiffs before you lost men." A sailor's shout cracked the debate. Signal smoke to the south. All eyes lifted. On the horizon, thread-thin plumes curled skyward. 8 of them. Yara's longships burned signal tar upon their decks. An agreed-upon pattern. 1 plume for sighting, 2 for enemy sail count Dorien. 8 signified a heavy frigate group bearing southwest. Grey Worm signaled confirmation with red pennant turns. Wind-kissed answered with a single flare. Daenerys' gaze narrowed. "They'll attempt to swing behind and slice our supply train." Tyrion's grin was wolfish. "That means they've left fewer hulls to guard the harbor. Volantis plays bravado with half a deck. Yara will lead them a pretty chase." "Ready the dragons," she said. Volantis loomed immense by dusk, its colossal black walls ablaze with torchlight that cast reflections across the Rhoyne like ribbons of molten glass. 2 bridges spanned the river's width. The old bridge bore archways carved into writhing tigers, eyes inlaid with emeralds that glimmered greedily. The black bridge, older, narrower, hosted slave markets and execution cages strung like lanterns on iron spars. Emaciated silhouettes swayed in the furnace air, wind chimes of flesh warning intruders. Wind-kissed anchored in open roadstead beyond catapult reach. Lanterns on Daenerys' fleet turned dark. Only the faint glimmer of watch lamps showed. Across the hush drifted the throb of drums from within the city. Slow, resonant, tribal. Volantis sang to its own heartbeat, daring storm. On the quarterdeck, Mazda read aloud from rebel missives, smuggled that very morning. Conspirators ready inside the Fishmongers' Guild. Red Temple dissidents willing to lower the harbor chain after second moonrise. Child slaves hidden in aqueduct tunnels waiting for signal. 3 dragon shrieks. Daenerys listened, palms flat on rail, nails tracing wood grain. Tell them to watch southeast sky. When Drogon breathes a single fan of fire above the eastern levee, they rise. Not before. Mazda nodded, rushing off to cage her ravens. Jon approached, hair damp, range pelt cloak traded for lighter, boiled leather suitable for river humidity. I'll ride with the first landing, take the levee scorpions. Grey Worm heads that assault, she replied. Then, I'll flank him. You are more valuable alive, commanding the relief contingents once the gates open. He stepped closer. I'm not your treasure, Daenerys. Let me fight. She caught his hand, squeezed. You will. When the city cries, we will need commanders to hold the peace as fiercely as we breach the walls. Hold until then. His jaw tightened, but he inclined his head. Ghost nudged her wrist once before padding to the rail, gaze fixed on the distant fires. Night crawled in thick and airless. Stars hid behind a veil of high, ash-laden cloud. From the Forge district, inside Volantis rose columns of sparks like prisoner prayers. On wind-kissed, every lantern but one was doused. Deck creaked, ropes groaned. Sailors whispered prayers to Mother Royne, to drowned gods, to nameless spirits. Daenerys ascended to Drogon's deck perch. The dragon unfolded, ridges glowing faint ember red. She settled into the saddle loops Tyrion had designed. Stitched from wyvern hide, reinforced with iron rings the length of her forearm. Straps cinched across her hips and thighs. A steel visor crowned with curved dragon horns shielded her brow. Grey Worm's skiff patrols slipped into water. 30 narrow hulls painted pitch black, each rowed by 8 unsullied. They sank into the delta gloom without ripple, darting for reed-choked inlets south of the Scorpion Levee. Their orders, lie silent until dragons struck. Davos stood amidships with Tyrion surveying compass and tide slates. Moon nears zenith, Davos murmured. They'll lower harbor chains soon or never. Rebels know the cost of delay, Tyrion said, voice taut. Above them, Daenerys whispered to Drogon in High Valyrian. Arlian es Shari. Silent skies. The dragon rumbled assent, wings unfurling with the hush of sliding canvas. She squeezed knees, muscles beneath her flexed as board thick as oak. With one bounding lurch, Drogon vaulted over starboard rail and plunged toward river mouth, 2 hatchlings arrowing after him like black comets. Air roared past her ears. The city surged upward, towers clustered like spears, thrust from underworld. She guided Drogon along the levee line. Scorpion frames silhouetted in torch squares, crews of tiger cloaks readying thick-shafted bolts. They shouted, pointing, but Dragon Shadow outran cries. On her signal, Drogon loosed a waterfall of red gold breath not at the enemy lines, but into the night sky. A single fan arcing east before dissipating into sparks. Across the river, on the Black Bridge, torches flared extinguished as conspirators cut brazier ropes. In the harbor, the great chain clanked once, twice, then rattled downward, plunging into oily water with a hiss that echoed off quay stones. Within seconds, bells shrilled through Volantis, discordant, panicked. Watchfires burst along parapets. Her rebels moved quick. Below, unsullied skiffs emerged from weeds. Grey Worm led the central boat. Ropes whined as hooks bit sun-dried masonry. Unsullied climbed like silent spiders. Atop the levee, tiger cloaks wheeled, surprise briefly stilling limbs. Grey Worm reached the first scorpion cradle. His spear flashed under torchlight. 2 enemy throats split. He turned, signaled, and an unsullied sapper swung a pickaxe into the scorpion's winch couplings. Iron shrieked. The machine collapsed sideways, cable snapping so hard it decapitated another guard. Drogon banked again, but Daenerys denied him flame. Instead, she loosed him downward. His talons shredded canvas awnings over the second parapet, scattering garrison archers. Only when a scorpion bolt whistled barely beneath his belly did she allow fury. Dracarys. Fire thundered, a short lance that vaporized the scorpion's arm and glassed the setstone at its base. Smoke curled vacuum black against the night. The barbed shaft fired half-drawn, careening into a tower's flank and exploding in sparks. Hatchlings Fela and Morgar followed, smaller breath but potent. They immolated 2 supply carts of bolts and pitch. Flames leapt 9 spans, painting water crimson tar. Across the river, inside the city's slave quarters, a roar answered. The roar of living men and women, unbridled. Chains clanged onto stone. Rebels surged from aqueduct mouths, torches aloft, wielding pilfered tools and butcher knives. Triarch banners burned, green silk shriveling into luminescent cinders. From rooftops came the ululating war cries of Rhoynar bloodlines, returning to rebellion. Windkist sounded her warhorn, 2 rising notes, 1 long. That signaled Devos cutters to beach on the deserted North Sandspit, offload Mercy Corps and food barrels to awaiting civilians. Jon Snow's detachment rode heavier cogs upriver under cover of burning quay smoke. On a narrow creek, he leapt waist-deep, sword drawn, but pointed downward. An invitation and warning both. 3 children met him at Culvert Mouth, guiding his troops to the Black Plaza where Triarch clerks still tried to rally militias. Jon's ranks formed a shield wall, pressing forward with measured, unhurried power. The unstoppable answer to oppression's brittle bravado. Within an hour, the eastern scorpions fell silent. By second moonrise, the north levee gates opened from inside. Unsullied poured into alleyways, not captured but welcomed. Their spears angled downward as freed citizens crowded them, crying jubilation. Daenerys landed Drogon on the old bridge's mid-span. Bricks cracked under his weight. He snarled at frightened gate wardens, smoke curling from teeth. She dismounted, boots crunching shard of emerald knocked from a tiger eye. Her escort of 60 unsullied formed a widening circle. She strode forward until her shadow drenched the mosaic floor. Icons of old Valyrian conquests defiled by centuries. She lifted her voice. People of Volantis, your chains are broken. Gather in the Plaza of Daenerys at sunrise. All slave holdings are dissolved. Every whipping post now stands for judgment of masters, not servants. Membahan. Echo raced along corridors. Firelight danced in her visor's gleam. Far below on the river, torch barges approached bearing Mazda's chainbreakers. Scribes armed with parchment and proclamations ready for stamping. The seat of empire shifted in that instant, not in steel nor gold, nor the old language of swords, but in ink, and in voices chanting freedom from alley to tower. By dawn, smoke hung over the city like morning veils. Fires still crackled in warrens where slaver barracks had been torched by their own chattel. Yet the streets did not choke with panic. Organization moved beneath the chaos. Mazda's scribes set up 10 registration tents along the great processional. Freed men queued quietly to enter their names in new ledgers. Each received a stamped chit allocating 2 loaves of harborside grain and a mug of water sweetened with citrus. It was not charity. It was a first proof that their labor would feed them first, not last. Daenerys convened a public tribunal in the Plaza of Dynasts. The marble esplanade, once reserved for Triarch proclamations, now hosted a simple wooden platform. She refused gilding. Volantini citizens, freed and freeborn alike, crowded in concentric arcs, many still clutching the rags or silk of prior lives. Grey Worm posted unsullied at every spoke alley. Dornish sandfighters stood on the roofs above, bows loosely nocked just in case. Jon escorted 2 triarchs forward in manacles of braided chain. Yurkavos and Lady Xanasa. Their clothes were soot-smudged, their stares brittle. Daenerys regarded them levelly before turning to the crowd. "I promised reckoning," she said. Her voice carried on unnatural hush. "But justice is heavier than vengeance. It asks thought, not impulse. These masters stand accused by their own city, not by my decree." She gestured. From the throng stepped 3 representatives. A Red Temple disciple with burned scars fresh across his palms, a fishmonger whose leg iron still rattled with each step, and a Mirish glassblower who had lived free but seen his apprentice flogged to death for dropping cooled sand. They recited charges: enslavement, torture, murder, debt bondage, theft of labor value. For each accusation, more witnesses spoke from the crowd. The air grew hot with words, with memories no longer shackled. When all testimonies ended, Daenerys asked the assembly for sentence. Voices rose. Some begged death. Some craved restitution. A few suggested exile. Tyrion, standing to her right, listened intently. Jon's eyes scanned edges for trouble. Finally, Daenerys lifted both hands, silencing them. "I will not crown myself judge of every crime. This city must judge itself." She motioned to Mazda, who stepped forward brandishing a parchment-headed Volantene Charter of Freedom. Mazda read sections, establishing a provisional council formed of equal parts: former slaves, free artisans, merchant guild representatives, Red Temple clergy, and even a seat for the Citadel's healers. That council, with oversight from imperial law scribes, would try the triarchs and any other accused. Gasps and murmurs rippled. Some relief, some frustration at denied blood. Daenerys raised her voice. "Blood may satisfy for a breath. Justice must feed generations." Nantater. She turned to Yurkavos and Xanasadai. "You will be held until council convenes. If found guilty, your wealth feeds those you starved. I promise you no torch will touch you until law passes its sentence." Yurkavos spat, but Unsullied escorted him away unharmed. That, Daenerys knew, was perhaps the day's greatest victory. A city trained to hunger after cruelty, now shown that power could refrain. 3 days bled into one long tide of rebuilding. Jon organized grain distribution from storehouses previously reserved for export. Tyrion and Davos repurposed the slaver kennels into bakeries. Brick ovens fired by stockpiled charcoal intended for slave forges. Grey Worm trained an auxiliary watch of former pit fighters, teaching them unsullied discipline while allowing Volantene flair. Curved spears decorated with tiger feathers stripped of paint. Yara returned triumphant. Her 8 longships had drawn the Black Fleet into reef-strewn shallows west of the Misty Isles, where hidden sandbanks gutted 6 heavy frigates. She captured 2 and scuttled the rest, taking 50 tiger-cloaked naval officers prisoner. In the Red Temple district, dissent boiled hotter. High Priestess Melora espoused that Daenerys was Azor Ahai made flesh, but a rival sect claimed her a demon of shadowfire. Debates spilled into streets. Daenerys met Melora beneath the towering orange glass of the great fire vault. Coals glowed like stars fallen to earth. She thanked the priestess for sanctuary, offered to free children, but refused any mantle of prophecy. "Flames reveal what hearts burn," she said. "Mine burns to free, nothing more." Melora bowed, enigmatic. At dusk of the 4th day, Quaithe appeared once more, on a balcony overlooking the Rhoyne, mask of frozen grief catching last russet rays. Daenerys felt her presence without turning. "The river flows backward now," Quaithe whispered. "Beware the tear that becomes a flood." Daenerys faced her. "Volantis is freeing itself. That river has turned." "Not Volantis," Quaithe replied. "Beware the Iron Bank. Coins melt to jagged edges when threatened." Daenerys stepped closer. "Will they fund revolt?" Quaithe's porcelain lips curved. "Coins buy whispers. Whispers buy daggers. Ask the dwarf who counts costs." Daenerys. In a flicker, she was gone, leaving only the sigh of evening wind. Tyrion indeed had heard whisper of Braavosi assassins. faceless men contracted not by Volantis, but an anonymous consortium of guildlords, whose debts risked default under abolition. He brought the rumor to Daenerys in the former Triarch council chamber, now bare save maps, charcoal dust, and piles of freedmen petitions stacked like battlements. "Will they dare?" she asked. "Against you? Perhaps not directly. Against your anchors, Mazda, Grey Worm, even John, absolutely. Nanias. Then we tighten circles, and we expose secrets to light. Offer amnesty for any lender who converts slave debt to wage credit within 1 year." Tyrion pursed lips. "Bribing them with their own money. Buying stability with hope," she countered. "Make cooperation cheaper than sabotage. Have to set oversight, joint ledgers, rotating auditors. Draft it." She exhaled. "When the Iron Bank threatens, we pay with architecture." He grinned despite himself. A novel collateral. While councils inked new orders, Daenerys returned to the streets, cloaked in plain linen. She climbed narrow stairs to rooftops where children tossed pigeon bones for luck, sat on cracked tiles of the Black Bridge and spoke with cobblers mending sandals of freedmen, marching to find lost relatives inland. Each story she etched in memory. A mother who traded her Triarch brand for Phoenix tattoo, a scribe who forged passes for slaves and now headed the new postal guild, a 10-year-old girl called Lara who had never seen sunlight until that week. Lara became her silent shadow, darting alongside Mazda, fetching quills, returning plates. On the 5th morning after the fall, Lara presented Daenerys with a crude copper coin hammered flat and hand-etched on one face with a child's attempt at a dragon. "So you remember us," she said. Daenerys knelt and accepted, tucking it beside her heart. News traveled swift. Norvos ratified full membership. Mira followed. Tyrosh capitulated with only minor skirmish. A self-inflicted riot of guilds clearing out their own slave pens before the Empire's dragons even arrived. Lys hesitated, offering gold in lieu of reform. Daenerys refused, dispatching Belleros Mo-Uhor with ships heavy on physicians and light on soldiers, wagering that healing could win an island famed for pleasure more potently than steel. Reports hinted success. The Iron Bank sent a delegation at last. 3 thin men, in sober gray, awaited her in the refurbished atrium of chains, ledgers chained to their wrists by silver loops. They bowed shallow. "Queen of Free Cities," the eldest said. "Your reforms imperil outstanding loans, totaling 7 million golden honors. The Iron Bank must insist upon structured repayment." Menin. Daenerys met their cold, metallic eyes. Or Bravos must recalibrate investment portfolios toward interests aligned with contract sanctity. Tyrion interjected, voice silken. "A pity. We plan to rewrite trade corridors granting Bravos galleys tariff-free dock along the entire expanse from Lys to Ashai. A venture projected to yield thrice our current valuations, given willing partners." The lead banker hesitated. Numbers flickered behind stoic facade. "Assurance. Contracts tomorrow," Tyrion said. "Provided the bank permits debt conversion, as Her Majesty designed." Daenerys added, "Debt for wage credit. Interest capped at fair rates. A living worker repays longer than a dead slave." After 20 heartbeats, the banker inclined his head. "We shall convey." Tyrion waited until they left before exhaling a laugh. "Living worker indeed. You just purchased our foes and sold freedom in one breath." "Sold." She turned to face plaza doors where freed children chalked lessons on stones. "Freedom is not merchandise, but hope financed is still hope." Seasons shifted. Monsoon storms battered delta levees yet held, reinforced under Grey Worm's supervision with stone blocks, reclaimed from raised slave barracks. Apple saplings from Pentos took root in river silt. Drogon nested on an abandoned tiger tower, now stripped of gilded predator sculptures and replastered with mosaic scenes of children reading under outspread dragon wings. One evening, months after the siege, Daenerys stood in a tower garden overlooking Royne's moon-silver ribbon. Jon joined her, cloak loose in the warm, fragrant air. Below them, marketplace stalls glowed with paper lanterns. Freed families gathered for the festival of first sunrise, a holiday the Empire had imported from a Roinar cult of the dawn. Music mixed with jasmine. "You did it," John said. "No," she answered. "We started it." "We..." She smiled. "All who choose to build rather than burn." He brushed a curl from her cheek. "Does the river still flow backward?" "For now it flows free." They looked east, where dark swells merged with night. Somewhere beyond horizon new storms prepared, but tonight, calm reigned. She whispered, "Tell me a northern tale." So he spoke softly, of snow-quiet forests, of white ravens that herald deepest winter, of small folk singing around hearths in languages half forgotten. She closed her eyes and imagined frost on cedar leaves, imagined ice melting under sunrise, and wondered whether empire could reach even there. An empire not of walls, but of open doors. Weeks later, a raven came bearing a parchment from Winterfell, penned by Sansa Stark. "The North watches your experiment with keen eyes. Freedom pleases us. Dragons we still fear. Yet we share cause against chains. Send grain ships and teachers. We will send furs and smiths. Let the world mend." Daenerys held the letter to her breast, felt the weight of destiny shifting. She summoned Tyrion. "Prepare an embassy to the north," she said. "Aid of wisdom for winter. The free world truly becomes a world when even the wall hears our song." Tyrion bowed, eyes gleaming. "And after the wall, after," she mused, gaze tilting skyward where stars blinked quiet. "Perhaps we sail farther. There are kingdoms trapped in silence we have never named. So long as dragons and will endure, chains need not." "None?" Drogon beat a single great wing overhead, scattering petals from rooftop planters into night. Lara, standing below with Mazda, leapt to catch one falling petal, laughter ringing like a bell. Daenerys watched it drift, pink against indigo, and felt time slow until petal touched her palm. Soft, weightless, yet carrying the whole promise of bloom. She closed her fingers gently around it, eyes reflecting the flare of lanterns below. And the free world empire breathed onward. One pulse, one choice, one fragile, unstoppable blaze at a time. Ka. The sixth bell of the evening tolled from the renovated bronze belfry on Volantis' old bridge, and Daenerys Targaryen felt the notes tremor, vibrate through the soles of her riding boots, long before it reached her ears. It spread beneath the marble plaza like the delicate crack of thawing ice, traveling outward along the latticework avenues to the great colonnades of the Royn embankment, where lamplighters were coaxing orange flames into glass globes newly etched with the emblem of the free world empire. Farther still it rolled, slipping beneath red-tiled roofs and cedar-framed dormer windows to the labyrinthine warrens of the eastern fish quarter, and ultimately into the restless tide beyond the harbor mouth, where it broke upon the anchor lines of 123 ships crewed by men and women, who 2 seasons ago had still pulled oars in chains. She stood alone atop the sun-bleached parapet of the Tiger Tower, gazing over a city forever altered. Smoke still rose from half-completed kiln houses, but it was the clean gray of brickwork, not the greasy black of burning flesh. Hammers rang like ceremonial gongs from the forges where Tyrion's new aqueduct valving was being shaped. Singers on the steps of the desanctified Triarch Palace rehearsed the dawn anthem, their high notes drifting upward to meld with the low thunder of Drogon's wings, as the dragon traced a lazy circle above the Royn. And everywhere, saffron and garnet banners fluttered from rooftops, their woven knot of broken chain and dragon aflame in the dying light. It should have tasted like triumph. Yet, even as the breeze tugged at her braids and carried the mingled aromas of saffron stew, river mud, and hot metal to her nostrils, Daenerys felt the old gnaw of unease inside her chest, the knowledge that victory was purchased on credit with history, and that history always collected its debts. Volantis was secure for now. The Provisional Council had survived its first 2 moons without fracturing, and the Iron Bank auditors had finally stamped the free labor bond part. But beyond the river delta, an empire-sized void still yawned, studded with cities that had bowed in parchment but not in purpose, and bands of old blood yet hunted the new order as a wounded tiger hunts fire. Behind her, measured footsteps scraped on sandstone. She did not turn. The particular cadence told her everything. Grey Worm approached with the silent precision of a man who had never learned to shuffle. He stopped a respectful 2 paces away, helm tucked beneath his arm. In the wan light, his close-shorn scalp gleamed like oiled bronze. "Your council assembles," he said. Magister Malrak of Lys arrived with the tide. The Dornish envoys also wait. Any word from Bravos? A second courier galley sighted off the point of Beaumont. Our coast beacons carried the message at dusk. Their colors show no banners, but pilots say the crew wear grays. She nodded, reflecting. The Iron Bank sends their reply. So it would seem. She watched a gull wheel across the blood-red disk of the sinking sun, felt the wind stir again. Then she pivoted and followed him down the spiral stairs into the heart of the tower. The council chamber had once been a den of velvet and leopard skins, reserved for tiger-cloaked tribunes. Now its walls were scraped bare, save for a single mural of a broken yoke, painted in quick mineral strokes by a Lysani street artist known only as the Copper Spirit. A crude ashwood table dominated the room. No hierarchy, no dais. Every seat equal save her own by necessity of reach. The table was scarred already by candle soot and quill lines, but when she set her palm upon it, she felt warmth instead of rot. Jon Snow occupied a simple oak chair at her left. His black curls were still damp from river spray, and the new leather jerkin, brown, unadorned, sat uncomfortably on his frame, as though it missed the furs of the north. He offered a half-smile she returned in equal measure. To her right crouched Tyrion on a stack of sailors' chests that raised him, if only barely, to the same eye level as the others. His parchment stack was already in disarray. A stray vellum corner protruding from between fingers stained with ink so permanently it looked like shadow. Mazda sat further down, stylus poised above a wax slate the size of her forearm. Davos Seaworth leaned back on 2 chair legs opposite her, thumbs hooked in his belt, the old smuggling scar on his neck puckered white against weathered skin. Yara Greyjoy sprawled nearest the door, boots on table edge, her sea-wolf grin undulled by weeks far from salt water. 2 new faces rounded the group. Magister Malrak of Lys, heavy-jowled, jeweled rings hidden because gaudy stone had become a dangerous luxury, and Sarala Dane, sister of Prince Corin, representing Dorne while her brother established marshalling grounds in Sunspear. Daenerys scanned the room, speaking before anyone else could cut the air. "Tonight, we treat 3 matters. Braavos, the western counterploys, and the March of the Harpies. Let's begin with Braavos." Tyrion tapped the pile. "Their delegation is twice as large as the last. 12 bankers, 3 scribes, 6 sellsword attaches, and a septon of the Iron Faith for whatever reason. They've requested an audience tomorrow noon, under the clause of final ratification." Mazda's stylus scratched. Final ratification meaning acceptance or refusal of the debt reallocation initiative. A polite way to say we signed their numbers, or they closed the purse, Tyrion confirmed. "Our coffers are not yet strong enough to fund the literacy edict and the Eastern levy dredging. Without that capital, I will not buy their coin at the price of loosening chains," Daenerys said. "If they demand concession on the slave debts, we refuse." Davos leaned forward. "We may keep principal, but we'll need replacement gold. The Dornish mines operate, yet transport is months out. Winter shipping lanes will freeze in the shivering sea. Norva's surplus grain sits upriver till thaw." "Namely," Magister Malrak cleared his throat. "My Lyseni consortium may advance half the sum if recompense comes as trade exclusivity in the Pearl Straits. 5 years, modest tariff." His eyes flicked toward Daenerys, quick as a rat measuring cheese. Yara laughed. "You'll eat those tariffs in month 2, Magister. Your middlemen squeeze profit like barnacles suck hulls." Malrak's nostrils flared, but he inclined his head. "Barnacles survive by adaptation. Surely the Empire champions adaptation?" "Bleh." Jon cut in softly but firmly. "Adaptation isn't parasitism. The free world funds itself by broad shoulders, not leeched pockets." A tension crackled. That Daenerys ended with a raised palm. We'll hold Bravos to fair contract. Tyrion, outline acceptable interest. Mazda, draft alternative financing using port toll increments. I'll meet the Sea Lord's men at noon and show them 2 doors, partnership or patience. Now a second matter. Grey Worm placed a dagger on the table, its tip pricking an unfolded parchment map of Westeros. Lord Paramount Samuel Tarley reports movement along the Mander. House Redwine marshals 3,000 swords. It seems Old Town's archmaesters agreed to entreat with Triarch loyalist. If they can promise restoration of the slave routes to the Arbor Vineyards. Redwine still fancies their wine runs on blood cheap as water, Yara said, smacking the table edge. We should sink their bright red hulls afore they leave the whispering sound. Violence in Westerosi waters invites the 7 kingdoms to call this an offshore invasion, Davos cautioned. Ironborn raids are tolerated, dragonfire not. Jon folded his arms. We can meet them politically first. Redwine answers to King Edric Baratheon at Storm's End nowadays, does he not? The boy king's regent is his mother, Lady Mariah. A letter from Sansa and Daenerys together might caution them. Daenerys nodded. I'll pen it tonight. Send by Raven. Meanwhile, Yara placed 2 swift longships outside the Sound. No attacks, observation only. If Redwine sails east, we get word before they reach the Stepstones. The room hummed breath. Unlike the early council days, no one protested her restraint. Third, she continued, harpies. Mazda glanced up, uneasy. Carved harpy sigils were found outside the freedmen's quarter in Marine. Burnt offerings, goats, also reports of missing children again. Her voice wavered. Grey Worm's knuckles whitened around his sheath. The sons of the harpy are like rot in wood, Grey Worm said. They always return. They return because someone finances them, Daenerys said. Tyrion. The dwarf rummaged and produced a scarlet ledger. Ship manifests inspected in Korth show anonymized payments through a shell company called Bright Horizon Hydraulics. Follow the cipher's 3 layers and the silver leads to Tolos, then to Mantares, and there, half a year ago, to Bravos. So the Bravosi underwrite the harpies with one hand and negotiate freedom bonds with the other, Sarala Dane said coolly. I admire audacity. A faction of Bravosi, Tyrion corrected. Likely individual stakeholders inside the Iron Bank rather than the Sea Lord's cabinet. Daenerys exhaled slowly. Anchor word to ambassadors. If they deny knowledge, we demand extradition of the Bright Horizon directors. They will face tribunal in Marine. Deo. Mazda scribbled. The meeting wound forward through lesser items. Repair quotas. Salt flat reclamation. The progress of the new alphabet primers. For Valasar outreach. When at last the candles guttered and Grey Worm declared the watch's 3rd bell, Daenerys dismissed them. They filed out, some in hush, others in quiet cluster. Only Jon remained. He approached while she massaged tired temples. Shadows from the brazier flickered across his cheeks. Too much for one night? He asked. She allowed a weary laugh. I feared conquest was the difficult part. Governing feels like walking a rope bridge made of latticework law with 1,000 daggers aimed from below. Yet you stay balanced. I wobble, she answered, half smile. And I lean on all of you. He drew her hand away from her brow. Lean harder then, we'll bear it. She studied his eyes, the flecks of coal at their center, the faint ache behind them. She wondered if he slept any more than she did. What news of the children's charter? He brightened a fraction. The first 25 orphans boarded 2 days ago. They're on the Cedarwind, bound for Pentos academies. Volantis found a teacher for each. Sorella Sand even volunteered. She begged to learn Rhoynar script. Pride warmed her chest, stronger than any triumph. Then tomorrow is worth today's wait. Outside, the 3rd bell boomed. She squeezed his fingers, let go, and said goodnight. She did not sleep. Worry prowled her chambers like a barred tiger until the pre-dawn hours, when she rose and went to the southern rampart, wrapping herself in a black riding coat against the river chill. Down in the port quarter, bakeries glowed, and she watched the first shift of freedmen lining up for bread. saw them banter with the Bravosi apprentices handing out measuring sticks to ensure loaves were honest size. That, she thought, is what freedom tastes of. Yeast, sweat, and laughter in a queue. Drogon glided from nowhere and settled on the parapet beside her, 20 tons of living shadow. He huffed a sulphurous plume that steamed in the cool air. She placed a palm on his warm scales. Somewhere in the city children squealed. It mapped roughly to the moment his silhouette eclipsed the rising sun. He hummed, a sound like a forge breathing. "We fly at noon," she murmured. "No fire, just wings. Let them see we do not hide." He pressed his snout into her shoulder, nearly toppling her. Noon in the exchange, atrium was spear-point bright. Sun shafts pierced the vaulted oculus and pooled upon polished black marble, where in old days slave transfers were notarized. The Iron Bank envoys stood at precise intervals, like statues placed by a fussy curator. Their leader, Tycho Maegor the Younger, wore a steel-gray doublet braided with tarnished copper, each braid symbolizing a senior ledger book. Behind him loomed 2 faceless men disguised as simple guards. Impossible to miss once you knew what manner of silence they carried. Daenerys entered with Tyrion, Mazda, Jon, and Sarala. No spectacle, no banners. When she stopped 2 paces shy of the bankers, Drogon screamed overhead outside, the thunder echoing like a falling mountain. Windows trembled. Maegor did not flinch, which she respected. "Your Grace," he greeted. "The Iron Bank honors its promise of final deliberation." "Then deliver your conclusion," she answered. He produced a scroll. "We propose amortized settlement over 15 years at 4% above prime on the converted slave debts, 20% collateral in harbor infrastructure, and refined ore futures. In return, a liquidity infusion of 7 million honors in Englesian silver." Tyrion arched brows. That rate already shaved 1%. Daenerys kept her expression flat. "And Bright Horizon hydraulics?" Maegor blinked. "A matter for the adjudicators of Loreth, surely. They funneled coin to terrorists who murdered children and priests in Marine. Extradition is non-negotiable." Maegor inhaled. "The Iron Bank cannot surrender private citizens without due claim. They financed war crimes." Her voice made stone vibrate. "Provide them, or the bank forfeits all Valyrian property rights in free world territory." Silence. One of the guards shifted, a subtle half-step. Not aggression, but purpose. Jon's hand brushed his sword hilt. Mazda's stylus scratched, though she never looked up. Maegor exhaled slowly. "The Iron Bank recognizes the severity. We will audit Bright Horizon. If documentary evidence, already proven." Tyrion slid a folder across. Marked ledgers, shipping dockets, codified signatures, verified by 3 independent scribes. Maegor's gaze flickered along lines, face unreadable. At last he returned the folder. "The Iron Bank does not underwrite terror. You shall have your extradition. We ask a single concession. Proceedings to be witnessed by a Bravosi magistrate." Daenerys nodded. "Granted. Then the bank ratifies the Freedom Reallocation Bond." He finished, signaled an aide. Wax seals were pressed. Quills signed. After formalities, Tycho Maegor bowed. "May the Empire grow solvent, Your Grace." "May it grow just," she replied. When they departed, Tyrion let out a breath. "You just yoked Bravos to our plow. Let's hope they pull," she said. That night, celebration fires dotted every quarter. A choir of children sang across the Black Bridge. Fisher boats strung colored lanterns on masts until the river looked like a drifting constellation. Daenerys walked the festival in simple blue robe, hood low. Guy. She shared hot spiced chickpeas with an elderly woman who had been a silk spinner since before the doom of Valyria. She danced a moment with 3 sailors who recognized her only when Drogon's shadow swept overhead and they realized whose hand they held. She grinned and kept dancing. Laughter chased her through the throng. Yet in a quiet alley behind the Embalmer's Guild, a dark hooded figure stalked. Daenerys felt the prickle of unseen eyes. She excused herself from the revelers and ducked into an unlit side passage, tracing its serpentine path to a dead-end courtyard. littered with broken amphorae. There she halted, pivoted, and spoke. "Step into the light." Wind fluttered a scrap of parchment across the stones. No movement. She rose to toe and scanned shadows. Nothing. But on the wall, a sigil had been daubed in fresh red paint. A single coin dripping 3 drops of blood. The Iron Bank's subtle threat. She touched the symbol with a gloved finger. The paint was still wet. A drugged dart sliced air where her head had been. She twisted aside, hearing it thud into cedar behind her. Out of darkness a faceless man sprang, knives twin arcs catching moonfire. She ducked, rolled. His first blade nicked her sleeve, slicing cloth. The second hissed past her cheek. She recalled Arya Stark's training story and pivoted into the assassin's flank. Her elbow rammed his throat. He stumbled, but these were men of water and shadow. He recovered at once. Another shape leapt from roof, but Drogon erupted into the passage with a roar that shook mortar. His maw snapped. A jet of warning flame burst a foot from the first assassin's mask. The man flinched, blinded by searing heat, and Daenerys drove a knee into his abdomen. He dropped. The second landed cat-soft behind her. She spun, his knife arced for her side. Drogon's tail whipped, cracking wallstone and sending the attacker sprawling. Brick dust filled the alley. Iron footsteps, unsullied, pounded in. Grey Worm shouted. The assassins darted opposite directions, scattering up walls like spiders. One vanished into rooftop gloom. The other found himself cornered by stone and dragon. He looked once at flaming eyes, once at Daenerys, and slashed his own throat rather than be taken. Grey Worm reached her side. "Are you hurt?" She glanced at the nick. The shallow burn of a near miss. Graze only. He stared at the corpse. "Faceless?" "So it seems," she said. "Send word to Maegir. I expect his cooperation to include keeping his hounds leashed." Grey Worm barked orders. Drogon snorted, smoke curling from nostrils. Daenerys stroked his neck and whispered thanks. 2 days later, reports arrived from Meereen. The last sons of the Harpy cell uncovered in the old sewer catacombs. 50 captured alive, the rest dead from burned incense traps. Jiqui, now governor of Bay of Dragons district, dispatched missives seeking witness testimony. Daenerys sent Tyrion and Mazda to oversee tribunal formation. While they prepared departure, Yara scouts confirmed Redwyne ships had anchored off the Green Strait, indecisive. The joint letter from Sansa and Daenerys, insisting that any incursion would violate the League of Free Ports, seemed to have cooled the Arbor's appetite for risk. For now. Summer tilted toward high heat. Jon led a tour upriver to the refugee farmlands, where Rhoynar engineers taught floodseed irrigation and Dornish knights instructed defense drill. Across the Empire seed sprouted. In Lys, Magister Malrock kept his bargain and financed 2 new grammar halls. In Norvos, the bells of freedom rang for the first graduates of the Academy of Equal Trade. 30 former debt laborers, who could now cipher interest faster than any guild clerk. In Tyrosh, the first equal-wage silk contract was signed, and guild elders, forced to adapt, discovered profit in unwhipped backs. But storms gather slow in high summer. Somewhere in the distant ocean beyond Valyria, a hurricane brewed monstrous, sucking warm wind from every quadrant. Fishermen saw portents, thrice-tailed comets, waterspouts lined with ghostly embers. Pilots warned that currents shifted unnatural, as if a leviathan stirred in the deeps. And in the broken ruins of Old Slaver's Bay, whispers of a new cult rose. Devotees of the night sky who promised salvation in the cold stars above, away from dragon heat. Quaithe sent another mask-veiled raven. When the tide of shadow returns, only the chainbreaker forged of dusk and dawn may hold the floodgate. And the gate's hinges are trust. Daenerys read the cryptic line at midnight, while river lanterns blinked like drowned constellations. She wondered if trust could ever be strong enough to hinge an empire. She thought of Jon's steadfast eyes, of Mazda's clear convictions, of Grey Worm's flawless loyalty, and of Tyrion's sardonic but stalwart intellect. She prayed it might. Autumn slid into the south like a patient thief. The air cooled, and the Rhoyne fog clung longer each dawn. Ships sailed north now, bearing not freed slaves but teachers, doctors, engineers, all flagged with the broken chain emblem. The free world empire had become more than vision. It was grain measured fairly, coins minted with fair weight, children learning letters once denied them. But each success bred resentment among those whose thrones stood on backs of others. In the month of the Barred Owl, 4 significant threats merged. First, a letter arrived from the Citadel, signed by Grand Archmaester Torgon. They would not recognize degrees awarded by Empire academies, claiming unsanctioned scholarship, poisoned knowledge. Daenerys countered by sponsoring a rival college in Pentos and inviting renegade maesters to staff it. But the Citadel's stance emboldened conservative lords. Second, the reconstituted Triarchy. Remnants of Myr, Lys, and Tyrosh hardliners chartered mercenary fleets to raid the Arbor and blame dragon loyalists. Wine flowed red with suspicion. Third, a faceless man's dagger struck in Pentos, slaying a chainbreaker scribal captain. The coin sigil again. Pressure from Bravos intensified. The Iron Bank's board fractured between cooperation and covert sabotage. Fourth, the Night Sky cult spread through slave ruins, preaching that freedom was illusion and only void eternal liberated souls. They recruited war orphan boys, teaching them to kill in the quiet between torches. In the council chamber, Tyrion pinned colored glass heads on a cork map. Died. 4, headed Hydra, he said. Cut 1, 2 more sprout. So burn the stump, Yara offered. Stumps rest sprout if root remains, Grey Worm replied. Daenerys folded arms. We will prune with purpose. Jon. He stood. We divide forces. I'll sail west to Old Town. Open honest discourse. Davos will treat with red wine on his smuggler terms. Yara keeps pressure on Triarchy raiders. Mazda and I coordinate a symposium. Bradda and I coordinate a symposium. Bring Citadel acolytes into the Empire's colleges for debate. Knowledge exchange tempers dogma. Magister Malrak, grown steadily more cooperative since Bravos' ratification, suggested trade concessions to lure the Arbor into neutrality. Sarala offered Dornish lancers to guard bakeries from Night Sky recruiters. Plans formed like crystals. Daenerys listened, then spoke softly. And I will visit Meereen. Tyrion's head snapped up. You risk gravest exposure. The Night Sky's root coils there. All roots lead there, she said. I created that vacuum when I flew west. Now I fill it with presence. Jon's eyes met hers. Then I go with you. She shook head. Your voice must reach Old Town. You hold northern perspective. They trust your honor. He grimaced but conceded. Then Grey Worm accompanies. Grey Worm stays to secure Volantis. I travel with only Drogon and a skeleton escort. Visibility matters. Silence argued for them all. In the end she won. The flight to Meereen felt both return and rebirth. Drogon cut across scarred lands where once she'd marched barefoot, where pyramids had belched smoke and blood. Now the Great Pyramid rose wreathed in scaffolding. The Harpy's old perch had become a garden of wind chimes forged from broken chains. As she descended toward the plaza, thousands pressed forward, hailing her with wild banners sewn from repurposed Harpy silks. Children clutched wooden dragons carved by freed artisans. Jiki greeted her at the base of the stair in gold-edged robes. Tears streaked her cheeks. Khaleesi, she whispered. Our mother returns. Daenerys embraced her tightly. Around them the crowd roared. Yet when night came, the cult struck. Silent shapes creeping along aqueduct parapets, flinging bone daggers at windows where chainbreaker officers slept. 2 died before unsullied shutters closed gates. Daenerys, sleepless, donned armor and stalked the tunnels with Jikwi, Drogon gliding overhead out of sight. They cornered the cult's local prophet beneath the old fighting pits. He was a boy no more than 14, face painted with starfield dots. He raged about void deliverance. But his rage wavered when she spoke calmly of choice, of freedom to seek dreams wider than night. In his eyes a flicker of doubt. She let him live and tasked him to speak truth of the chainless dawn he'd been denied. Sunrise revealed the cult's weakness. Most followers were lost or frightened, not zealots. She offered amnesty and education. Over half accepted by midday, leaving leaders exposed. Those would face council tribunal, not dragonfire. Meanwhile, Jon sailed to Old Town on the Sea Spear, escorted by Dornish triremes. Inside the High Tower, he debated archmaesters until throats hoarse, speaking of living proof. Children freed, economies thriving. Maester Luwin's diaries from Winterfell were produced to show precedent of knowledge evolving. Some aged scholars balked, but younger ones listened. By the time he departed, 6 acolytes pledged to join Pentos College for a term. Cracks in the Citadel's wall. Yara raided Triarchy supply lines, intercepting a convoy of cell sales and bending them to Empire contracts with promises of higher pay and no lash. Davos convinced Redwine to stand down by smuggling the Arbor's best vintage to Tyrosh. If they lost trade to the free world, their casks would spoil unsold. And Tyrion uncovered the faceless conspiracy. 5 disaffected Iron Bank directors pool funding sabotage. At Daenerys' request, Major delivered them into Empire custody. They faced open trial in Volantis, a spectacle that ended with sentences of life service repairing the levees their plots had sought to undermine. The Night Sky cult withered without funders and fear. Its orphans were housed, its leaders exiled to remote islands where they tended lighthouse fires under watch, light against night. The hurricane that brewed for moons finally crashed upon Valeria's shattered peninsula in the wolf moon of early winter. Ash and rain whipped into a frenzy that tore the last harpy banners from Astapor's ruins. Drogon flew into the tempest, screaming defiance, while Daenerys clung to his saddle, charting damage. In the storm's eye, she glimpsed pillars of obsidian revealed by receding surf. Ancient Valyrian forges long buried. She marked them for study, already dreaming of using that black glass to forge monuments to a new age. Swords of remembrance, plowshares of promise. When they returned to Volantis, the city still stood, levees strong, forges intact. And in the council chamber, they found new letters. Sansa wrote that Winterfell's first Empire-chartered grain barge had arrived before snow closed the White Knife. A parchment from Old Town bore the Citadel seal. Torgon agreed to send a delegation to observe Empire academies, and a single slip of paper from Braavos, unsigned, bore 4 words in Braavosi. "The moon owes you." Tyrion chuckled. They're paying in riddles now. Daenerys pocketed the slip. Better riddles than knives. They toasted cider in chipped clay cups. No goblets. The taste was sharp, honest, unpretentious. That night Daenerys walked the river promenade alone. Lanterns rippled across water. She felt the Empire breathe. A young creature still, ribcage fragile, but lungs expanding with each freed voice. Somewhere children recited the dawn anthem. She took the copper coin Lara had given her, rubbed thumb across the child's dragon mark. 5 hours, she whispered to the empty dark. Her vow to let the tale breathe slow still guided her. No quick endings, no shortcuts. Let history unfold with patience. Let empires be built on hearts, not pyres. She cast the coin into the Rhoyne. It splashed tiny, lost. But ripples spread wide, touching every moored hull, before fading into the greater current. And after a moment, in her mind's ear, she heard the faint toll of the tower bell once more. The long echo of change rolling outward into the waiting world, carrying with it promise enough to last lifetimes. High clouds swept low across the Volantine sky, modeling the city with gray shadows that raced along streets where, not long ago, only the branded and the damned moved so openly. The Empire's banners snapped in the river wind, red and gold over the bustling market, where Rhoynar traders bartered with Dothraki merchants and Myrish glassblowers haggled with Pentoshi farmers for the finest salt wheat. Smoke drifted from the levee forges and mingled with the scents of spice, citrus, roasting lamb. Along the riverfront, the new levee guards, a mixture of unsullied freedmen and volunteers from Norvos and Tyrosh, stood at ease with spears up, their armor patched but burnished, talking quietly with dockhands as if peace were simply another day's work, and always had been. Daenerys stood on a second-story balcony, watching the morning's commerce with a gaze sharper than any knife. The city pulsed, not with fear but with an energy she remembered from her earliest days in Marine. A restless, volatile hope, eager to surge forward or shatter at a single misstep. She felt that energy inside her as well. Nervous, alive, resolved. She had slept little in the weeks since her return from Marine, but in her exhaustion was a sense of mounting momentum, as if a tide once dammed was finally breaking free. The day's council was already gathering in the old Dynast's hall, and the bells rang in a sequence that had not sounded since before the doom. 3 long, 1 short, 2 long. A call not of crisis, but of decision. Grey Worm waited for her at the bottom of the stair, his uniform immaculate, his scarred face as calm as ever. He nodded once, no more, then led her through the old corridors where new banners covered faded murals of the Harpy's reign. The chamber was crowded. Not only the regular council, Jon Snow, Tyrion, Mazda, Davos, Yara, Sarala Dane, but also envoys from Braavos, Norvos, the Citadel, and Dorne, with a sullen delegation from Lys, red-eyed from a long night's negotiations over tariffs. Some wore the Empire's dragon and chain badge openly, others tucked it into sashes or belts, but none dared refuse it. The Lyseni Magister, who had once boasted of 700 house slaves, now wore simple wool, his rings replaced by a single steel loop, token of his city's hard-won, still uneasy, emancipation. Mazda recorded everything from her low stool at Daenerys' left. Stylus quick and confident. The council's table was cluttered. Scrolls, contracts, ink bottles, a battered map of Valyria's western reaches, half covered by the newest grain manifest from Norvos. Across from Mazda, a girl not yet 10. One of the first freed Marini's orphans, drew a careful dragon on the margin of a treaty, unnoticed by all save Daenerys, who let her continue without a word. Tyrion began without ceremony. The Western Fleet sails today for Old Town in the Arbor, escorting 3 grain ships and the Citadel delegation. They'll dock at Saltmouth by week's end, assuming fair wind. Jon will ride with them and deliver the university charters to Grand Maester Torgon in person. Jon inclined his head, his expression set in the calm mask he wore when responsibility weighed most heavily. If the Archmaesters balk, I'll remind them that 100 acolytes have already pledged to serve in Pentos and Volantis, with or without the Conclave's blessing. They know their authority slips by the season. Venator. Sarala Dane leaned forward, sun-bronzed fingers steepled. And what of Lys? Will their shipyards finish our order of triremes before the winter storms? The Lyseni Magister bowed his head, voice careful. Our workers are free men now. They ask only the same wage as Taroshi. Production slows, but not for lack of effort. Your order will be filled by the turn of the moon, or I'll stand forfeit. Yara, grinning wolfishly, tossed him a copper coin. Keep your word, and we'll send you Noroshi iron, enough to plate 10 hulls. Fail, and I'll let my sailors swim your harbor and see if your new overseers know how to swim. Yasin Sao. Laughter loosened the council's tension, but only briefly. Tyrion rapped his knuckles on the table for order. The Triarchy still raids in the Stepstones, with Myrish pirates claiming to be loyal to the old order. Davos reports that the Triarchy's gold now comes from a consortium of Kohoric and Tyroshi bankers, not the Iron Bank, but privateers emboldened by the Citadel's waffling. If we want the Arbor's wine and Old Town's learning, we'll need those sea lanes clear. Mazda's voice was steady as she added, Our agents in Kohor confirm that the leading gold man is one Ulrich Brafin, recently exiled from Bravos for illegal slave speculation. He has 3 fast galleys under Volantine colors, but answers only to his own purse? Daenerys considered, then said, Let Brafin see his reputation crushed before he drowns. Tyrion, draw up a bounty. Double the Triarchy's pay for any privateer who switches allegiance, and offer the harbor rights of Pentos to those who bring proof of slave gold seized. Now. Tyrion nodded, already sketching lines on a clean scroll. A few rich pirates will come. More will see there's no gold in the old order's promise. Sarala asked, And Kohor? Daenerys' voice was cool. Kohor may keep its blacksmiths, but not its slave pits. We send a letter. Join the Empire. abolish forced labor, or face embargo and the loss of every Valyrian steel shipment from Volantis. Bene, Davos grunted approval. A man's coin spends faster than his pride. They'll bend. The Lyseni Magister looked uneasy, but said nothing. Grey Worm gave his report last, eyes hard. Night Sky Cult is gone from Meereen. In Volantis they linger at the margins, but with the last amnesty, half their number has come forward for work or study. Yiki's new. Night schools. Free classes. Bread for students. Take the rest. The root is dying. Only in the slums by the lower levee do they still preach. Baron? Tyrion looked to Daenerys. The question as ever is how hard to squeeze the last rot. Too much force and it festers. She shook her head. No more pyres, only light and food. Increase the night patrol, but every patrol must bring bread. A full belly tempers sermons of despair. Offer teachers and counsel in the slums, not just guards. Grey Worm bowed agreement, and Mazda's stylus flickered across the wax. A quiet settled. Tyrion shuffled his notes, then said, "And the last matter." Mazda? Mazda's eyes glimmered. The free world's first census is complete. Total population in Volantis, 170,000, with 20,000 freed in the last season. 30% of children under 12 are enrolled in the new academies. Adult literacy, up to 20%, nearly double last year's number. Grain imports from Norvas and Mar have stabilized prices. Violent crime down, though theft has increased. Mostly petty, mostly Davos let out a slow breath. That's a world I never thought I'd live to see. Jon rose, adjusting his cloak. Then let's keep it that way. The council broke for a meal, drifting out in knots. Daenerys lingered. The orphan girl who'd drawn the dragon looked up at her, then pressed the inked page into her hand. "For you," she whispered. "So you remember us when you fly?" Daenerys smiled, ruffling the girl's hair. "I never forget." Later that day, the wind shifted. From the southeast, dark sails appeared. 3, then 5, then a dozen, all striped with black and gold. Word rippled up from the docks, and soon all Volantis watched as the sails approached. At their head flew the banner of Braavos, but behind it streamed the pennants of Qohor, Lorith, and distant Mantaries. It was the largest foreign delegation yet seen since the Empire's founding. Daenerys, armored but bareheaded, rode Drogon to the outer walls. The dragon landed with the delicacy of a falling feather atop the southern gate. Below, the Braavosi flagship anchored. A slender man in blue brocade stepped forward, hand raised. He bore no weapons. Tycho Maegir, elder of the Iron Bank, had come in person. He bowed low. "Your Grace, Queen Daenerys, breaker of chains, founder of the Free World Empire. Braavos honors the invitation to sit at your table." Daenerys answered from atop Drogon, voice carrying. "Braavos' honor is hard won. I hope it is not lightly spent." He inclined his head. "We come to propose the future, not purchase the past." Drogon huffed, smoke curling from his jaws. Daenerys smiled. "Then disarm your ships and send your envoys. We will speak as equals, or not at all." Major gestured. The ships furled their sails, soldiers lowering shields and stacking spears on the decks. Braavos meant to treat, not threaten. Within the hour, the foreign delegation entered the council hall. Tycho Maegir stood at the head, but beside him was a figure in high-collared black, the Sea Lord's own heir. Qohor sent a blacksmith with arms, scarred by centuries of labor. Lorith sent a pair of twin priestesses, and Mantaries, strangest of all, sent a masked negotiator who spoke through a mesh of silver that made every word ring like a bell. Maegir spoke first. Braavos recognizes the Free World Empire as sovereign and proposes a league of equal cities, all signatories to the new charter. Abolition of slavery, free trade under fixed tariffs, common law for all persons, right of education and assembly, will share the protection of Braavosi fleet and the wealth of the Iron Bank. In return, the Empire commits to enforce the charter in all member cities, not just its own. "Yeah," the Mantarian's bell voice echoed. "And who enforces the enforcer?" Daenerys answered, "A council. One seat for each signatory, including Bravos and the Iron Bank, but also including cities not yet freed. The law will be written by consensus and enforced by a rotating peace commission, drawn from all who sign. No queen, no emperor, no tyrant, only the Chainbreaker's law." Cohor's blacksmith knelt, pressing his palm to the marble. "We will bring the new code to the Smith's Hall." The Lorathi priestesses said as one, "Loreth will send students to your schools." Teiko Magir nodded, satisfied. Bravos consents. The League is born. It was not an empire in the old sense. Daenerys saw that instantly and welcomed it. No Iron Throne, no dragon's shadow over every city, but a net of vows. Each one as binding as a link of Valyrian steel, none stronger than the trust that held them together. She signed the compact with ink black as the river, then let each envoy add their mark. Mazda wept openly, her stylus falling from her fingers. Tyrion, eyes bright, offered the Bravosi a cup of Myrish firewine, and grinned for the first time in weeks. Jon squeezed Daenerys' shoulder and said quietly, "You broke your own chain. That's how it lasts." In the weeks after, the League spread. Cities as far as Yunkai and as remote as Ibn sent word. The first rain convoys passed unmolested through the stepstones, flying the League's new flag, a broken chain in a ring of stars, silver on midnight blue. Children in Volantis learned their letters from scrolls printed in 3 languages, and the old slave blocks were rebuilt into fountains or libraries. On the Black Bridge, poets painted murals of dragons and wolves, and the hand of a small girl feeding a coin to the river. One morning, Daenerys stood on the quay, watching a new class of chainbreakers board the Cedarwind, destined to teach and build and mediate in towns that had never known law, only power. The orphan girl clung to her, then let go, running up the gangplank into a future Daenerys could only imagine. Drogon's shadow passed overhead, silent, immense, and for the first time in memory, no one ducked or shrank from his wings. Instead, they cheered, raising their hands to the sky as the dragon banked and soared west toward the horizon. Jon found Daenerys as the sun climbed. "It's a long way from Astapor." She laughed. "It's a long way yet to go." He offered his hand. "We walk it together." She took it. Always. And so, as autumn mellowed into winter, and the world spun on through winds of change, Daenerys' free world empire, now a league of equals, carried on. No longer just a story of fire and blood, but a living song of chain breakers, sung in 100 tongues across a free world that, for the first time in memory, truly belonged to all its children. The bells rang again. 3 long, 2 short, 1 rising. And somewhere a dragon's cry joined in, not as warning but as promise. The future was not hers alone, nor any queen's, but the world's, endlessly remade, link by broken link, hour by slow hour, as hope and freedom kindled the dawn. Doinen, I, Iki. Mist rose in pearl veils from the Rhoyne and drifted across the embankment, shrouding Volantis in a hush, so complete the first bells of sunrise seemed to ring from within the fog itself. Light crept over the river's black glass, painting banners with a soft blush, dragon, chain, and crescent star alike. Ships bobbed at anchor, their hulls decorated with sigils both familiar and new. For the first time in memory, there was not a single chained man or woman among them. The night guards exchanged bows and lanterns as the day's stewards arrived, the ritual seamless as breathing. In her study high above the old Triarch Plaza, Daenerys leaned over a letter, ink drying on the last line. Her window was open to the dawn, letting in the distant scent of bread and wet stone. Mazda's sleeping cot was empty. She'd gone before the 4th bell to oversee the first batch of League census takers, volunteers from 5 cities. Daenerys smiled as she reread her note, a message to Sansa in Winterfell, requesting the North's new delegation to be headed by Arya Stark, if the roads allowed. It was a letter full of purpose and promise. She felt the weight of it. How far they had come, and how far they had yet to go. The city stirred below, but not with the ancient anxiety of the slave market. Now came the murmur of children reciting their letters, fishermen calling out the price of the day's catch, a crier reading the new tax rates, lowered again on bread and salt. In the main square, masons hammered the last plaques into place on the wall of remembrance. 1,000 names, each belonging to someone who died in the old regime or the War of Chains, now carved in black and gold for all to see. The orphans' choir, their voices higher than bells, rehearsed the dawn anthem by the steps, while the dockside smiths set new wind vanes atop the levee to warn of approaching storms. John found her at her desk, hair unbound, draped in a linen shift as plain as any peasant's. He knocked softly on the doorframe. She looked up, and their eyes met, not as king and queen, or even as leaders, but as two who had chosen, day after day, to endure and build and keep faith. Davos and Sirala are waiting in the East Wing, he said. The first merchants from Ibn arrived on the tide. There's word from Lies. One of the magistrates seeks an audience, says it's urgent. Daenerys set her pen down and rose. She clasped his hand as they crossed to the stairs, pausing for a moment at the landing, where the map of the League, so recently painted, covered half the wall. Dozens of new pins were pressed into the north and east, names written in 6 languages. She brushed her fingers over Bravos. Then the wolf sigil on Winterfell. It never ends, she said softly, but at last it grows. He squeezed her hand. That's all we can ask, to see it grow. They made their way down into the day-lit hall, the crowd already swelling. Sirala Dane stood with Davos near the archway, consulting the grain reports. The Ibanese envoys, heavy-set, bearded men in dyed wool, waited by a marble fountain, their hands folded respectfully. Nearby, the Lyseni magister, Linero, wrung his hands in a way that told Daenerys more than any words. Something in Lys was unsettled. She greeted the Ibanese with dignity, hearing their proposals for a school and hospital in exchange for League harbor rights, and asked Mazda, who appeared with wind-ruffled hair and a sheaf of forms, to record the terms. They would send teachers north, and the Ibanese would send their legendary whale oil and healing salve south. It was a bargain reached not with swords or dragonfire, but with voices, one of 1,000 such bargains, none less valuable than a crown. When at last she beckoned Linero to a private alcove, he bowed low. Majesty, forgive my haste. There is unrest. 2 noble houses wish the League's tariffs lifted on certain dyes, and threaten to hire the black sails if their demand is not met. There are whispers, too, that a brotherhood of old overseers, men with triarchy gold, seeks to arm street gangs. They say the League grows weak, too merciful. They think perhaps they might restore the old ways. Daenerys considered this, neither angered nor alarmed. Tell those houses their dye contracts will be matched by free labor guilds. They may keep profit, but only if they invest a tenth in League schools. As for the black sails, I'll send Yara Greyjoy to Lys. Let them try her steel, and the Brotherhood. Arrest any who plot violence. Show mercy to the rest, and offer amnesty to those who work in the open. Show mercy to those who work in the open. Linero nodded, relief mixing with awe. When he departed, Jon asked quietly, "Is there ever an end to it? Each city, each plot, each threat. We cut one root and another coils up behind us." Meh. She smiled, not sadly. Freedom is not a door you open once. It's a gate you must guard, and build and open again every day. We will always be needed. That is the price, and the gift. By mid-morning, the council had swelled. The new League delegates, Ibanese, Bravosi, Norvoshi, even a tall Nathi merchant in silks, joined at the oval table. Sirala and Davos presided with calm order, Mazda recording and translating. Yara entered with salt in her hair, her boots flecked with brine. She grinned and tossed a handful of black sails onto the table. Tokens, not threats. Proof of another foiled plot. The room erupted in laughter, but the work did not pause. Tyrion entered last, parchments under one arm and a fresh wine stain on his collar. He dropped into his chair, scanned the room and said, "Trade has risen by half again this quarter. The arbor's casks are emptied before the river ice. Grain from Norvus fetches a fair price in Lys and Tyrosh. The first coin mint in Volantis is producing League currency now, silver chains and copper dragons, with Bravos and Myrene on either side. Nund. Mazda grinned, displaying one of the new coins. The broken chain, the dragon, and now a stylized book as well. Knowledge minted as currency. John handed over a bundle of scrolls from the Citadel. The first cohort of League-trained healers has been invited to observe at Old Town. Sorella Sand will oversee the next class. She's managed to convince even the Archmaesters that women and bastards have minds worth measuring. Nelsunimund. Daenerys said, "Send Sorella our thanks and our promise that any student who wishes to serve the League will have a post. The world will know their names as well as any lords." Yara chimed in, "Aye, and any sailor from the Stepstones with the courage to swim the Rhoyne can have a League mark and a deckhand's pay. No questions asked." The laughter returned, but the business did not slow. Throughout the morning, the council resolved a dozen more matters. Fresh water rights for the free cities, the allocation of teachers to villages on the Jade Sea, the settlement of disputes between salt miners and grain farmers. Not a word was wasted. It was governance as Daenerys had never seen in Westeros, slow, patient, and unrelenting. The work of peace as noble and endless as any war. When noon approached, she called for an adjournment and led Jon, Tyrion, and Mazda up to the roof. From there, they looked out on the city. The rebuilt walls, the rising academies, the new hospital shining white above the docks. The banners rippled in the wind, joined now by a host of smaller flags, the wolf, the kraken, the sun and spear, and even the green tree of the north. Dragons soared above, smaller ones born since Drogon's prime now patrolling the skies in disciplined patterns. There was no threat, only vigilance. Mazda leaned on the parapet, face turned up to the sky. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "when the chains first broke? When the city shook and we feared the next dawn?" "Now," Daenerys nodded. "Every day. It's why we keep building." Tyrion looked at Jon, then at Daenerys. "Did you ever imagine it would last this long?" Jon, grave as a winter lord, shook his head. "Not at first. But I see now. If you plant enough seeds, the roots tangle. The world cannot unmake them all." Daenerys gazed out at the harbor, the ships, the schools, the markets humming with 1,000 dialects. She reached for Jon's hand, squeezing gently. "Let's make it last 100 years more. Then let our children take the torch." Nannerpormuro. He smiled, rare and real. "Let's." The afternoon passed in meetings, treaties, reconciliations. Delegates from Korth arrived, offering pearls and spices in exchange for League mediators to resolve an internal feud. 2 former slave masters from Yunkai, now respected bakers, presented bread to the council and pledged to open the first bakery school for orphan children in 3 cities. The Laseni Magister, who once quaked at every rumor now, offered a plan for joint shipbuilding, inviting Norvashi and Volantine engineers to Lys. By dusk, Daenerys was weary, but it was the best sort of exhaustion, the kind that followed days when the world felt closer to justice than it had ever been. Mazda brought her a tray of simple food, and they ate on the balcony, watching the light spread along the river. Will there be dragons 100 years from now? Mazda wondered. If we care for them as we do our people, Daenerys replied. If not by blood, then by story and hope. And what of you, my queen? Mazda asked. How long will you stay? Daenerys touched her shoulder. Warm. As long as I'm needed. As long as the chains of yesterday threaten tomorrow. When I am gone, others will stand where I stood, and the work will go on. Then said, Mazda nodded. I will teach the orphans to remember. That night, beneath the first true stars of autumn, Daenerys walked the gardens. Lara, the orphan who had drawn dragons for her, found her by the wind chimes, clutching a scrap of parchment. I wrote a new anthem, Lara announced shyly. For the League. Daenerys knelt to listen. Lara sang in a tremulous voice. Words halting, but bold. One dawn we ran from shadow. One night we broke the chain. Now sun and rain and kindness. Our banners on the plain. No lord shall call us lesser. No queen forget our name. We stand, we learn, we kindle. A world remade by flame. Daenerys embraced her, fighting tears. As seasons turned, the League's reach grew. Ships from far Lane and the Summer Isles carried delegates to Volantis. In the north, Sansa's letters told of new alliances, League-trained healers tending harvest fevers, teachers reading dragon stories to the children of Carhold and Bear Island. In the west, the last slave galleys were hunted down and seized, their crews tried under the new League law. Cities once bitter rivals, Tyrosh, Lys, Meyer, hosted joint festivals of music and knowledge, their streets filled with new hope. It was not perfect. There were riots, betrayals, attempted assassinations, but none could unmake the roots that had tangled so deep. Tyrion grew older, but his wit never faded. Davos retired at last to White Harbor, but wrote letters every month. Sarala Dane returned to Dorne, where she opened the League's first desert academy. Mazda rose to become the Empire's first Secretary of Schools, her signature recognized from the Wall to the Jade Sea. Jon never left Daenerys' side. When they grew old, they walked the riverside hand in hand, watched the children race along the levee, and spoke quietly of days long past. Drogon passed one summer, old and immense, his bones buried in the gardens behind the League's first university. Every year, on the night of his death, lanterns were floated down the Rhoyne in his honor, and the orphans sang Lara's anthem. The Free World League endured. Other cities joined, some left, but always there were new faces, new voices, new stories added to the great mural that now stretched the length of the council hall. A tapestry of dragons and ships, children and teachers, broken chains and blossoming branches. In her last years, Daenerys often sat in the shade of the garden, listening to the bells and the laughter drifting on the wind. Lara, now a grown woman and scholar, read to her from new books, histories written by those who had once known only chains. The world had changed, and the work was not finished. But for the first time, Daenerys Targaryen knew what it meant to build peace, not for a season, but for an age. One morning, as sunlight streamed across the banners and wind rippled the water, she closed her eyes and let the sound of the river carry her to dreams. The Chainbreaker's work, she knew, would go on, link by patient link, hope by stubborn hope, into a dawn where every child could write their own name, free and unafraid, for all the days to come. Ka-Kei. Hei. In the pre-dawn hush, Volantis shivered under a thin mist that blurred the shapes of ships, towers, and bridges to pale ghosts on the river. The city was neither asleep nor fully awake. Bakers kneaded dough behind fogged windows, and lantern-bearers patrolled the new boulevards that had replaced the old slave alleys. From the garden terraces of the palace, Daenerys watched as the first light seeped gold into the eastern sky, turning the Rhoyne to a river of molten bronze. Her hair hung loose, silver gold against the pale blue of her robe, and her breath clouded in the chill, a reminder that winter, even this far south, crept near. She was not alone. Jon stood beside her, wrapped in a stark wool cloak, face serene and alert. Mazda arrived with her ledger, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Yara Greyjoy paced at the far end of the garden, idly tossing an apple and biting it with every slow turn. Grey Worm emerged from the shadow of the cypress, a silent pillar, always vigilant, and not far behind him, Lara the scribe's apprentice clutched a slate and stylus, eager for every word. The day would be long. The Dawn Council, convened at Daenerys' request, was set to deliberate the Charter's most ambitious reform yet. The right of assembly and self-rule for every town, not just the great cities. Tyrion, awake since midnight, was already laying out parchments in the council hall below, aided by Sarella Sand, who had arrived with the North's delegation. Arya and a cadre of Northern and Riverland lords. Davos Seaworth, older and whiter now, pored over grain ledgers and trade manifests, preparing arguments for a new class of peasant proprietors. The palace bells tolled, a soft, low sequence, the League's new code, signaling all to gather. Below, the city stirred. 1,000 lamps winked out as shutters opened and families welcomed the day. Daenerys touched Yon's hand. "We go." They passed beneath the frescoed arch, now overpainted with the League symbols. Chain, dragon, book, and a child's hand. The corridor rang with their footfalls. At the door to the Great Council, Mazda paused to scribble a note to herself, her hair in disarray. Arya met them inside, face all angles and mischief, but her eyes as clear as the north in winter. "I've already scouted the kitchens," Arya whispered. "No poison today, only nervous bakers." Daenerys smiled. "Good. We need them strong." Jon clasped Arya's shoulder, and they entered the chamber. The space was transformed. Long benches, open windows, and no dais. Just a great round table ringed with cushions and chairs. Everyone filled. Freedmen, nobles, merchants, scribes, teachers, even a smattering of children brought to witness a new form of governance. At the center, Tyrion's voice rose above the murmur. "Order," he called. By the code of the League, all voices heard, all votes equal, all proposals entered into the record. Mazda sat at the scribe's bench, Lara at her side. The charter was rolled open, its fresh ink gleaming. Tyrion looked to Daenerys. "Queen Daenerys, your motion." She stood, letting the morning light warm her shoulders. The League was born to break chains, not only of flesh but of mind, tongue, and hope. Today we propose the right of every settlement to choose its own council, to set its own law within the League's code, to send its own delegates to this chamber. No more orders sent from thrones, no more silence from the fields and harbors. All shall speak, all shall vote. If there is a flaw. The debate that followed lasted until noon. Northern lords asked for guarantees of safety and tradition. Braavosi merchants demanded assurances that property would be protected. Mazda read the draft in every tongue. High Valyrian, Common, Summer tongue, the rough river dialect of Norvoshi bargemen da. Arya argued for the rights of the roadless, the orphans and travelers. Yara reminded all that the sea did not wait for parchment, but could be mastered by those who dared. Sarella recounted the histories of the sand snakes, each one a parable of resistance and reinvention. Tyrion kept score, joking when the tension grew sharp, prodding when voices faltered. Davos, ever the peacemaker, helped craft amendments, grain allotments for each town, open courts to resolve disputes, the guarantee that every child would learn to read, write, and cipher, no matter how remote the village. By late afternoon, the vote began. One by one, delegates rose, some with trembling hands, others with clear eyes and fierce pride. The votes were tallied, and for the first time in living memory, the will of the whole ruled the greatest city in the east. Mazda stood, hands shaking, and proclaimed, "The Charter of Assembly and Open Voice passes by unanimous vote. The law is made." A cheer erupted, unexpected, wild, ragged with relief. On the river, bells rang from every quay. The market stopped as news spread, and old men wept beside children who had never known another world. In the days that followed, the city transformed again. Local elections swept through the districts, with teachers, bakers, smiths, and even an ex-harpy mask maker elected to the new town councils. No one knew all the rules at first, but the scribes recorded every attempt, and within a fortnight, every town in Volantis, and half the villages up the Rhoyne, had held their own assemblies. The riverbanks, once stained with blood, became the routes by which ballots and bread traveled together. Daenerys did not preside as queen. She walked the streets in simple dress, attended only by Mazda or Lara, and sometimes by Arya or Jon. She listened to complaints about noisy councils, greedy millers, or the slowness of the new waterworks. She listened to praise too, and hopes, and fears. Every voice, she thought, was a stone in the new foundation. Some were rough, some smooth, but all would shape the future. Yara sailed east to Lys, where she met the would-be rebels and, after a tense standoff, convinced them by word, steel, and song to join the League, sending their surplus to famine-stricken villages instead of hoarding it for their old masters. In Norvos, the bells tolled for the investiture of the first League mayor, a freed bricklayer named Halo, who quoted Daenerys in her oath. "Let each day's work build a world worth keeping." Jon journeyed to the north and back, carrying with him stories, promises, and new alliances. Winterfell sending its young to study in Volantis, League-trained healers braving the winter roads to Carhold. Even wildlings coming south to learn of freedom and trade. Arya became the League's quietest envoy, slipping from town to town, mediating feuds, training orphans in self-defense, and teaching council members that power was a blade better shared than hidden. Mazda, Lara, and Sorella wrote and published the first League Reader, a book of laws, stories, poems, and practical advice for every citizen, illustrated with the dragon, chain, and book. Copies were printed in 3 scripts and sent up and down the river, from Meereen to Sunspear and beyond. Davos, ever the voice of reason, traveled the ports of the narrow sea, striking bargains that turned former pirates into customs officers and ensured that the League's taxes reached even the smallest islet. He wrote letters to Daenerys every week, signing them, "Your old smuggler," and always ending with news of children thriving where once only orphans wept. As winter's chill deepened, the League's council hall became the warm heart of the world. Delegates from distant cities arrived by ship and sledge, their faces sun-browned or snow-pale, bringing with them grievances and gifts. They sang the Dawn Anthem in new dialects, and the orphan choir swelled until its voices filled not just the square but the city itself. Drogon and his younger kin flew less now, content to bask in the sun, watched by teams of keepers and scholars, some who remembered the old days, some too young to remember anything but peace. The League survived its first test of true crisis, a failed harvest in the Upper Rhoyne. Instead of riots or war, the town sent word for aid. The council convened an emergency session, and within days grain ships from Norvos and Lys had arrived, the surplus distributed in fair measure. For the first time, no child starved that winter. Word spread west and south. In the free cities and beyond, rumors grew. Some whispered of a sorceress queen, others of a council of dragons, still others of a parliament where even the poorest child could speak. Caravans from Ashai, ships from the Jade Sea, and riders from the Dothraki grasslands all came to see what freedom meant when it was not merely a victory, but a daily labor. And every day, Daenerys rose before dawn and walked the terraces, listening to the city breathe. Every week, she sat with Jon, Mazda, Tyrion, and the council, some old, some new. The arguments never ceased. Neither did the laughter. Years passed. Children grew into counselors. Old rebels grew into teachers. The League's laws spread to more cities, some eager, some reluctant, but all changed by the slow, patient work of peace. Sorella's colleges welcomed students from every corner of the world, and Lara became the League's first poet laureate, her anthem sung at every major gathering. Daenerys and Jon grew older, their hair silvered, their hands still entwined as they walked the banks of the river at dusk. Mazda, now matronly, led the census takers and teachers. Yara, white-haired but unbowed, commanded the League fleet. Arya, ever restless, traveled east at last, seeking out the unknown, leaving behind a dozen protégés. The world beyond did not stop. There were wars, intrigues, and threats. Always. Yet the League held, because its roots were not in fear or gold or fire, but in voices and hands and patient, stubborn hope. The Chainbreakers' work never ended, but each generation bore it gladly. One winter, long after Daenerys' hair was white and her step slow, the council voted to name the great plaza in Volantis after her. She declined, asking instead that it be named for the orphans who first learned to read beneath its arches. And so it was. The Plaza of Dawn, marked with every child's name the League could find. On her last day, Daenerys sat on the terrace, Jon at her side, Mazda and Lara reading letters aloud as bells tolled for a new harvest festival. She listened to the laughter, to the soft anthem sung by children, and to the river's endless promise. "Is it enough?" Jon asked quietly. She squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with the morning. "It's everything." And when the mist rose again from the Rhoyne, and the bells called out to the League, the world kept turning, link by link, song by song, a future rebuilt every dawn by those who once had no voice, now joined in a chorus that would outlast even dragons. The chainbreaker's dream, finally, was no longer a single life or even a single age. It was the world's own. A fire no winter could put out. A river no empire could dam. A song rising with the sun as long as hope endured. The last snows of winter melted slowly on the embankments of Volantis, mingling with river mist to wreathe the city in a veil of soft light. Sunlight returned with cautious warmth, and the city's people emerged in bright cloaks and clean linen to sweep the stones, scrape the moss from stairs, and string banners for the Equinox Festival. The first held without tribute to slavers or ancient gods in 1,000 years. On the Dawn Plaza, children chased each other between the pillars, their shouts and laughter ringing out beneath the new murals painted by guilds from every league city. A circle of elders recited histories to an audience of apprentices, stories of wars and tyrants, yes, but also of the long years since the breaking of the chains, tales of new laws written in 5 tongues. Of merchants and scribes from Lys and Norvos and Myrene assembling side by side, of how a council of fishermen once outvoted the goldsmiths and set a price for flour that kept 100 families fed through a hard spring. Daenerys walked the plaza with Jon at her side, their steps unhurried, their faces open to every smile and greeting. She wore no crown now, only a cloak of soft blue and the League's broken chain badge pinned at her shoulder. Jon, grayer at the temples, moved with the quiet assurance of a man who had seen kingdoms rise and fall and learned to measure peace, not by banners, but by harvest and song. A procession wound up from the harbor, led by Mazda and the census children. Their arms were full of scrolls, each inscribed with the names of those who had survived the hard winter, a record not just of survival, but of belonging. Lara, grown tall and poised, followed them, carrying the League's anthem on fresh parchment, a new verse added each year. At the council steps, Tyrion greeted them with a flask of Myrish red and a lopsided smile. "The Arbor's latest cask," he said, "and a trade manifest from Korth. Cinnamon, silk, and a letter from the Spice Guild. They want permission to build a public bathhouse on the river. I told them to speak to the League Masons, but they sent 100 weight of rose oil and a promise of funding for the next Readers' College." No. Davos, beard streaked white, stepped forward with a roll of maps. "Norvoshi miners have struck fresh water under the hills, enough to irrigate 3 more farming villages if we build the aqueduct in time. Sorella students have drawn the plans. All we need are hands." Jon nodded. "Put it to the council today. The volunteers will be found." "No." Daenerys smiled at Mazda, who handed her a sheaf of messages. Letters from the north. Sansa's congratulations on the festival. Arya's greetings from far Ashai, where she now taught League law and self-defense to children whose first memories were of chains. They entered the council hall, now lined with portraits and banners of every League city. Sarala Dane presided, with Sorella and a new cohort of counselors from Ibn, Loreth, and Sunspear. The hall was full, but the mood was calm. Disputes about river rights, not war. Debates over grain taxes, not iron thrones. When Daenerys addressed them, her voice was steady and warm. "Let us begin by reading the new names," she said. And Mazda and the children recited them all. Every newborn, every freedman come to claim a new name. Every child enrolled in a school. Every elder who survived to see another equinox. The council listened, and the people beyond the doors cheered. Tyrion rose for the next order of business. "The Arbor requests an extension of credit for the next grape harvest, in exchange for training 3 League vintners. Korth proposes to sponsor a ship of teachers and healers for the villages near the Boneway, and Lys petitions to host the next council, offering its new theater as the hall." Davos added, "The stepstones have been quiet. Yara's last report says piracy is down. The new customs officers work well, and the taxes from shipping exceed projections. The only complaint is from a merchant who claims his cargo of olive oil froze in the last cold snap." Laughter filled the hall. Sorella produced a jar of salt from the summer isles. "Perhaps he should try preserving it like this." Jon, scanning the grain and census reports, said, "There are fewer hungry mouths than last spring, but I propose we dedicate some of the surplus to the poorest villages, send a fleet of barges upriver before the next coal." Sarala agreed. "We will pass it today. The Council of Norvos has already voted their share." Discussions followed. About harbor rights, apprenticeships for orphaned children, the regulation of magical study in the academies, a petition for a new bridge at Sunspear, plans for an equinox feast open to all, the planting of more fruit trees along the river, and, at Lara's gentle urging, the building of a public library for each major town. Each matter was resolved, not by edict, but by vote and compromise. The day passed in a flurry of action. Teachers from the League academies led songs and recitations in the plaza. Scribes distributed new readers, printed in a dozen dialects, illustrated with stories of dragons and rivers, of children outwitting kings, and of the birth of the League itself. The orphans' choir sang, joined by young voices from every city. When the sun reached its zenith, Daenerys and Jon slipped away for a quiet moment by the river. They sat on the edge of the new quay, feet dangling over the water, watching merchant ships unload silks and spices, and fishermen barter for saltite. Drogon's memory was everywhere. The wind that rippled the banners, the mosaics of dragon wings on the council hall, the laughter of children unafraid beneath a sky once shadowed by fire. Jon touched Daenerys' hand. "Do you miss it, the old days? The war, the fire, the power?" She smiled, a little sad. "Some days I do. But not the loneliness, not the silence after the storm. Here, every voice answers, every hand helps. I would not trade it." He nodded. "Neither would I." She watched a small boy help an old woman with her net. "When I was a child in exile, I dreamed of a home that could not be taken, of a city where every window was lit. I never thought it would be this. I never thought I would live to see peace built one brick at a time." He kissed her hair. "You gave them hope. They did the rest." Daenerys closed her eyes, feeling the sun, the wind, and the pulse of the city. The chorus of bells drifted across the water, one for every major town, one for every new beginning. She whispered a prayer, for the League, for its people, for all the children yet to be born. Evening brought feast to every square. Bread and wine were shared with strangers. Lanterns floated down the Rhine to remember the lost, and the choir sang Lara's anthem beneath the stars. Tyrion drank more than he should and gave a rousing speech, quoting old jokes and new wisdom. Davos led the children in a ring dance, and Yara, home from the sea, recounted stories of her last pirate chase. As darkness settled, Daenerys and Jon stood together on the balcony of the council hall, watching the city glow. Mazda joined them, her arms full of new letters from across the League. "There's word from the Summer Isles," she said. "They wish to send delegates, and from the Citadel, a new Archmaester willing to recognize our healers. And from Sansa, an invitation to Winterfell for the solstice." Daenerys smiled. "The world grows." Mazda nodded. "And remembers. The children learn your anthem by heart." Jon put an arm around Daenerys' shoulders, and together they looked out on the city. It was imperfect, always changing, full of work and worry, but alive. Each day reborn, each night at peace. Far off, the bells tolled again, a new chime, a new day beginning before the last had ended. Lara's voice drifted up from the plaza, clear as the river wind. "We stand, we mend, we kindle, and write a world anew. No queen shall rule in silence. When hope belongs to you." Daenerys rested her head against Jon's chest and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of the river and the distant spice markets. The laughter of children, the promise of dawn. In the months and years that followed, the League grew beyond anything she or anyone had ever dreamed. The children of the freedmen became the first poets, healers, engineers, and counselors of a world that rebuilt itself from hope. Cities that had once been names on a conqueror's list now stood as partners, joined by law, trade, and the slow, stubborn patience of peace. And always, beneath the banners and the bells, beneath the words of counsel and the laughter of feasts. The quiet memory endured. The first broken chain. The first child who read her name. The first morning when the world awoke free. Daenerys watched it all, a little apart, a little amazed. She grew older. Her hair turned silver white. The city changed, the world changed, but the League and its song went on. When at last she felt her work was finished, she entrusted the council to Mazda and Lara, and traveled north with Jon, welcomed by Sansa, cheered by the children of Winterfell, honored at the feast with bread and salt and stories. There, in the long bright days of the northern summer, Daenerys Targaryen found rest at last, not as queen, not as conqueror, but as a mother of a world remade. At dawn the bells rang again, one for every hope, every promise, every life made new. And the story of the free world empire, written not in fire but in patient, stubborn love, became the anthem of an age. Ish Kal. Years passed, and the memory of the old world faded into the background like the last embers of a fire, now replaced by a city glowing with life. Spring returned to Volantis with a burst of color, flowering vines climbing the arches of the Dawn Plaza, fruit trees blossoming along the river's edge, banners of the League and every member city rippling above the harbor and market. The air was heavy with lilac and the bracing tang of salt and river mud, and with every sunrise the city woke with a sense of purpose so natural and persistent that those who remembered tyranny wondered if it had ever been real at all. On the promenade near the river, Daenerys walked alone, her hair braided and caught with ribbons given to her by the children of the League. Her stride was slow, unhurried, her eyes never at rest. She nodded to bakers hauling trays of sweet bread, to masons rebuilding an ancient wall, to the orphans who paused their chalk games to wave at the mother of the new morning. She paused to chat with Lara, now a full scribe and teacher who balanced a basket of scrolls in one arm and 3 wriggling fosterlings by the other. "New lessons today?" Daenerys asked. Lara smiled, eyes crinkling at the edges. A story from the Summer Isles, a poem from Karth, and Tyrion's latest satire about magisters and their hats. The children laugh until they cry. And do they remember the chains? They remember the stories. That is enough. Lara shifted her basket, and one of the children tugged her sleeve, anxious to get to the morning's lesson. A fresh wind came off the river, carrying the shouts of merchants and the calls of the ferrymen poling their way up the long wharves. The city was a tapestry of voices: Volantine, Bravosi, Summertongue, Norvoshi, the low patter of Valyrian from old men playing dice under the eaves. No tongue was forbidden, no name erased. The League's law protected every song, every story, every new beginning. Drogon's bones, white and gleaming, stood in the garden beyond the university, a shrine wreathed with flowers by children on every feast day. Once a year, Daenerys herself laid a garland there, and in that gesture the memory of the dragons, of the burning and the broken, was kept both sacred and gentle. Council meetings were less frequent now, and more joyful. Mazda, as chancellor, presided with a calm authority, the great table surrounded by counselors and envoys from every city and village. Today, the hall hummed with talk of a new bridge upriver, the expansion of the free schools to the islands, and an agreement to standardize weights and measures. No small task, Tyrion insisted, given the stubbornness of Tyroshi vintners and the pride of Lysine goldsmiths. Serala Dane, her hair silvered by the southern sun, presented the plans for the first League College of Natural Philosophy. "We'll admit every child who can read and every child who wishes to learn, regardless of birth or coin," she declared, her voice ringing out across the benches. A Lorathi delegate in sky blue robes added, "And we will endow the first chair for magical studies, with a library open to the public. If the Citadel in Old Town wishes to send observers, let them come, as equals." Tyrion, now portlier in content, tapped his notes. "The Arbor will underwrite 3 scholarships if the League guarantees a steady supply of Norvoshi stone for their new cellars. And Korth will donate 6 master glassmakers to teach in Sunspear if the Lysens permit the old canals to be reopened." Saw. Jon, less inclined to words but more to action, produced a tally of League healers sent north over the winter, their letters and reports filled with news of good harvests, new settlements, and even the return of wildlings to farm in the old abandoned fields. "The North sends back salt fish, timber, and wool," he said, voice deep and steady, "and an invitation from Sansa to the next midsummer council at Winterfell." Mazda's face softened. "It will be the farthest north the League has ever sat, a sign that peace has truly come." That night, Daenerys dined in the garden with Jon, Mazda, Lara, and a handful of close friends. The lanterns flickered in the branches above, casting shifting patterns on the table laid with simple food: black bread, stewed lamb, new cheese, apples, and a sweet red wine from the arbor. No one wore badges or titles. Mazda spoke of her latest visit to the Braavosi free schools. Lara recited a poem written by a child in Norvus, in a dialect no one else could quite follow, but which made everyone smile. Jon asked, "Did you ever imagine this?" His eyes on the children playing tag near the hedge, on Mazda's laughter, on the easy peace of the evening. Daenerys shook her head. "I imagined only freedom. I never thought of what might follow." He squeezed her hand. "That's why you succeeded. You never tried to rule it all. You gave it away, day by day, link by link." Tyrion, refilling his glass, grinned. "It was my advice all along. Break the wheel, then let someone else build the cart." Company laughed, and for a moment Daenerys felt the old ache, the burden of the years and wars. But when she looked at Mazda and Lara, at Jon's quiet strength, at Tyrion's clever kindness, she knew it had all been worth it. Later, after the meal, Mazda showed Daenerys a new book, a ledger of the League's laws, annotated and illustrated by children. Each chapter began with a tale or a poem, and in the margins were drawings. Ships, bridges, dragons, fields of wheat, a chain with every link open. "The children made these," Mazda said. "They argue over the stories, whether it was dragons or clever hands that built the new world. They wonder if it'd ever be broken again." Daenerys traced a finger over the drawing of the chain. "Tell them it could. Tell them that is why they must remember. And keep building." The next morning, Daenerys and Jon rode north out of the city, through villages where orchards were in bloom, and every door was open to travelers. They were greeted everywhere with bread and salt, and children ran beside their horses, shouting their names and asking questions about dragons and distant lands. The League's banners fluttered above every school and bridge, but so did the symbols of each place: a red fish for a fishing village, a blue leaf for the willows along the Rhoyne, a green wolf for the north. They crossed ferries run by women who had once been slaves, stayed in inns managed by orphans grown into adults, and listened to stories in tongues Daenerys had never heard before. Everywhere, the world was remaking itself. Not perfectly, not quickly, but with a determination as fierce as any war. Councilors met in barnyards, town squares, even under willow trees, settling disputes with argument and laughter. Scribes copied League laws and read them aloud to any who would listen. The free schools sent out new teachers every month, and the road north to Winterfell was busy with caravans carrying grain, books, wool, and children, eager to see the world. At White Harbor, Davos greeted them with hugs and tears. He was older, slower, but his eyes sparkled with the same wry warmth. "We're building a new harbor," he said, "with League coin and Norvoshi stone, and Manderley engineers. Fish are running thick this year. The children have started a choir, and they sing Lara's anthem every festival." In the north, Sansa welcomed them to Winterfell with a feast. The hall was filled with League delegates, brown, black, and pale, old and young, their voices rising in the great din of peace. Arya returned from the east with tales of distant lands, and brought with her a caravan of traders from Leng and Yiti, their gifts and languages adding to the growing story of the League. Sorella Sand arrived in the last snow of spring, leading a band of students from Sunspear and Court. She presented Daenerys with a book, a collection of histories and dreams, penned by children from every corner of the free world. The council at Winterfell lasted a month. Debates on land rights and mountain passes, on the best way to heat the great halls, on the best recipe for bread. Disputes flared and faded, but every issue ended in laughter or thoughtful silence, and the work went on. No decision was perfect, but none were final. Every law was a door, never a wall. Daenerys spent the long northern evenings walking the battlements with Jon. They watched the aurora dance above the wall, listened to the howls of wolves in the forests, and talked of everything they had lost, and all they had made. Jon's hand was always warm, his heart steady. In the mornings they visited schools and gardens, greeted children by name, and listened to new anthems, each more hopeful than the last. Years passed, and the League's peace deepened, its roots twining through every village and city from Meereen to the Wall. Daenerys grew old, her silver hair now white, her back bent by years, but her gaze undimmed. She spent more time in the garden at Volantis, reading letters and stories sent from every corner of the League, surrounded by children eager to hear her tales of dragons, deserts, and storms. Jon remained at her side, a constant companion. When at last the years claimed him, Daenerys mourned him in silence, then returned to the work, the endless, imperfect, beautiful labor of peace. Mazda and Lara led the council now, the next generation rising with wisdom and patience. Syrella's students filled every academy. Yara's fleet guarded the League's coasts. Tyrion's wit outlived his years in every law, every song. And so the League endured. New banners rose, old wounds healed, and the world became not perfect, but possible. Each child born free became a link in a chain no tyrant could ever bind again. On the last day of her life, Daenerys sat beneath the willow by the Rhoyne, the river broad and shining, the city alive with the song of bells and children. She listened as Lara and the counselors recited the League's anthem, her anthem, joined by 1,000 voices from every city. When the sun set, she closed her eyes and let her hand fall to the grass, smiling at the memory of dragons, of hope, of the long, patient dawn. She knew she would be remembered, not for the wars she fought, but for the world she helped build. One chain broken, one hand joined, one voice raised at a time. And as darkness fell and the bells tolled, the Free World League carried on. Link by link, song by song, a living testament to what could be made of freedom and mercy, and a promise for every dawn yet to come. In the years after Daenerys' passing, the city of Volantis did not mourn with a great wailing or the trappings of fallen royalty. Instead, the bells of 100 towers and 1,000 riverboats sang together at dawn and dusk for a full moon cycle. A song of gratitude and remembrance, not sorrow. The old queen's name was spoken in every tongue, and the orphans she had cherished carried garlands of white iris and blue flax to the willow, by the Rhoyne where she had last closed her eyes. Beneath those branches, the people gathered and read from her stories and the League's charter. Some recited her speeches, others simply remembered how she had listened to the smallest voice. Mazda, now chancellor by common acclaim, knelt at the willow with Lara, Tyrion, Syrella Dane, and delegates from every city and port. She placed a copy of the charter and a sheaf of children's letters beside the roots, then rose and led the first council of the League's new era in open air. On the grass, with the wind off the river threading between the benches and the low stone marker they set. Not a tomb, but a promise. Here, she listened. That spring, as if in blessing, the willow blossomed beyond memory. White and blue flowers cascading into the river, carried by children who came from as far as Lys, Winterfell, and Meereen. The river folk said the willow's roots reached every city of the League, and those who sailed the Rhoyne carried twigs and petals to plant along their home banks, vowing to sow the dawn where night once ruled. The work of the League went on, not with Daenerys' will, but with the habits she had seeded in her years among them. Mazda proved a gentle, shrewd chancellor, equal parts scribe and diplomat, always ready to hear a complaint or shape a compromise. Lara, now chief reader and poet, wove every new law into a story for the schools. The anthem became a cycle, each verse marked by a season or a great event. Tyrion, ailing in body but sharp as ever, trained a cohort of little lions, boys and girls adept in counting, law, and laughter. Syrella returned to Dorne and Sunspear, where she founded the first League sanctuary, open to any exile, rebel, or seeker. The League's council grew and shifted. Every spring and autumn, the full council gathered in a different city. Lys, Norvos, Myr, Korth, Sunspear, White Harbor, even Bravos and the Arbor, whose old suspicions had softened into pride at their place in the order. No single city could dominate. No single ruler could claim more than a seat at the table and a voice in the debate. The charter was revised, not rewritten, tweaked to fit new towns, new industries, new freedoms. The archives at Volantis swelled with amendments, all copied in triplicate, each new version footnoted with the names of children who'd suggested changes. The idea that law was a living thing, not a chain but a bridge, had become gospel. In the wider world, the League's example could not be ignored. The Jade Sea sent its trade envoys, the Summer Isles their priests and shipwrights. From distant Yiti and Leng, delegations arrived to study the schools, the charter, the public assemblies. Some cities tried and failed to copy the League's model, unwilling to yield old privileges. Others, seeing the prosperity and peace, voted by citizen assembly to apply for membership. Each new city's joining was celebrated with bells, feasts, and the reading of the charter, never by force or gold, but by consent and song. The free schools multiplied, now in every major city and most large towns. Teachers, no longer just freedmen or orphans, but the sons and daughters of old houses and distant lands, vied for posts at the colleges. Sorella Sands College of Natural Philosophy grew into a cluster of gleaming towers and glass houses, open to anyone able to read and willing to work. The Library of the Dawn at Volantis, built beside the willow and the river, became the greatest in the known world. Each year, children contributed their stories and poems, and each year, the walls inched higher. Magical study found a place again, regulated and shared openly, never hoarded. The Citadel and the Archmaesters at Old Town, after long debate, acknowledged League degrees and sent their own to study at Volantis and Sunspear. In time, a joint assembly of healers, magisters, and natural philosophers wrote the first common book of science, dedicated to the chainbreakers who gave us light. Beyond the walls, life continued to change. Grain ships sailed farther than ever. Rivers and roads linked the free cities to the far north and west to Old Town. Wildlings from beyond the wall brought new crops and tales to League markets. Children born free knew the anthem by heart. Even in places untouched by League law, travelers brought stories of the Dawn plazas, of women and men debating in the open, of the willow at Volantis where any child could kneel and ask a question, and someone, usually a scribe, sometimes a counselor, sometimes a stranger, would answer with patience. The old fears did not vanish. Plagues came and were met with healers and quarantines, not panic or scapegoats. A hard winter starved the mountain passes. The League Council voted emergency grain shipments and sent teachers to rebuild. Pirates rose in the stepstones, were met not only with fleets but with amnesties and offers of League citizenship. Most took the chance at peace. In the west, as Sansa aged into a wise and honored Lady of Winterfell, the north became a full member, sending its own readers and healers. The wall remained, but as a monument, not a border. The first freeborn Night's Watchmen, sons of wildlings, Summer Islanders, and Braavosi sailors, took vows to protect the road north, not to bar it. Each year, a festival on the wall marked the return of the sun, and the League's anthem rang out, mingled with wolf howls. Daenerys' legacy, at first a story told in the plaza and the garden, became a holiday. Chainbreakers' Day, celebrated on the anniversary of the Charter's passage. On that day, no work was done. Instead, every citizen of the League was encouraged to teach something, mend something, or hear someone new. The willow by the river became a shrine of learning, and it was custom for every counselor, upon election, to sit there in silence for an hour before taking the oath. Mazda, white-haired and fierce, made it her habit to spend every dawn there, speaking with any child who approached. The anthem continued to grow, each year's verse marking a challenge met. The year the fire swept the fish market, and the city rebuilt together. The winter when the boats brought grain upriver through sleet and ice. The time of plague threatened, and was stopped by public effort and new knowledge. In each, the words were simple: hope, mercy, memory, trust. Lara's last verse became the most beloved. In gardens by the river, and halls of stone and song, we mend with every morning the world we found so wrong. No queen shall rule in silence, no king command alone. We kindle and we carry the fire that makes us home. As generations passed, people began to forget the names of the kings and tyrants that once ruled the world with fire and fear. But the name Daenerys remained, not just as queen, but as listener, chainbreaker, builder. Her stories were read alongside new ones, of poets and healers, explorers and inventors, of ordinary men and women who raised bridges, taught orphans, or argued law in the market square. The Willow's roots spread, the League endured, and the anthem outlived every bell and banner. No world remained perfect, nor did the League's peace go unchallenged. But each time a chain was threatened, or a voice silenced, or a river flooded, the answer was the same: a council, a vote, 100 hands joined, a new verse written in hope. And always, in every new city, in every new generation, there were those who remembered how it began, with a queen who chose not to rule from a throne, but to walk the world, listening and leave it better than she found it. The bells rang, the river flowed, and the dawn kindled, again and again and again.